Chapter 60. Yunyen Tsukuyumi was a third-year student at Tori First High School. She was the daughter of the Tsukuyumi Financial Group, an international technology company. Her status was on par with the second-year student Kanzaki Colored Glaze. However, she usually treated people with sincerity, gentleness, and generosity. She was so amiable to everyone, without any airs, and always had a gentle smile on her face. She didn't have the delicateness and arrogance of a young lady, nor did she have the nobility and willfulness of a young lady. All she had was an elegance and calmness that no one could find fault with. She was as impeccable as the kid next door. A perfect young lady, a perfect woman. No one would dislike Yunyen unless there was something wrong with that person's brain. Such an exaggerated perception was the general public's impression of Yunyen in Tsukujigami. Without a doubt, such an evaluation could be said to be extremely high. It had already reached the clouds and was even about to ascend to the heavens. However, from Yunyan's point of view, this was not what she saw in her eyes. I, Yunyen Tsukujiri, am actually a very boring person. Yunyen didn't know when she started to feel this way. As a true heaven's chosen daughter, she had been born with a charm that was beyond the reach of countless ordinary people. No one would dislike her, and no one would speak ill of her. No matter what she did, she would be praised. But such a convenient ability, she was tired of it. Yunyen was soon tired of such a world, and she was also tired of such a person. She, who possessed a powerful charm that could make people like her no matter what she did, had instead lost her own path amidst everyone's praises. If Yunyen wanted to do it, she could become a star, a president, a prime minister, or even a saint. However, she was not excited at all. Because this kind of achievement was not achieved by Yunyen's hard work, but by her natural strong charm. Could such an achievement still be called an achievement? At least not in Yunyen's opinion. At this time, Yunyen, who had avoided the noisy crowd, sat alone on the roof of the old teaching building and closed the book in her hand. Phew, so that's how it is. This novel writing method even monkeys can understand, is really beneficial. After getting down from the railing, Yunyen put the thick book in her bag and stretched. When she stretched, her well-developed and alluring figure became particularly obvious. Fortunately, there were no creatures around. Otherwise, he would have a nosebleed on the spot. That's right, the book Yunyen was hiding here to read was something similar to a novel teaching, which was also one of her future dreams. The world of literature was a relatively fair world. No matter if the writer was ugly or beautiful, rich or poor, the words they wrote were all the same. No matter how charismatic I am, it won't make my novel better, right? And if I use a pen name to write, no one will know who I am, right? So, if I can write a good novel with a pen name, doesn't that mean I'm not a mediocre person who relies on his natural charm to make a living? With such thoughts in mind, Yunyen plunged into the world of novels. Although she hadn't written for others to read yet, she was still in the exploration stage. What is that? Just when Yunyen was considering if she should continue to improvise a few paragraphs, she suddenly saw the cleaners downstairs pulling up the fence and hanging up a sign. This old teaching building was only occasionally used for some side classes. No one would come here after school. Therefore, Yunyen was relieved to stay here and not be surrounded by friends. But something strange seemed to have happened today. Could it be that this building needs to be repaired or cleaned? If that's the case, then I'll leave first. I don't want to cause trouble for Mr. Cleaning. After nodding her head, Yunyen picked up her backpack and walked down the stairs with brisk steps. Of course, what Yunyen didn't expect was that the old teaching building she was in had become an existence similar to the Middle East battlefield. A quiet teaching building, a frightening battlefield. The two merged into one at this moment, making the surrounding space feel like it was torn apart. Now it was more than an hour after the afternoon classes ended, around 4:30. The afternoon sun was quite weak. It shone through the window into the corridor of the old teaching building, rendering the already dead atmosphere as desolate as the end of the world. In this situation, Ryuto, who was hiding in the corner of the third floor, closed his eyes and concentrated on listening to the movements around him. Tap, tap, tap. Soon after, extremely light footsteps gradually came up the stairs. The footsteps were very light. If Ryuto's ears were not pressed against the wall, he wouldn't have heard it. From another angle, it was not difficult to see a figure in a green combat suit slowly moving towards the corner where Ryuto was. The first one to reach here was the Russian mercenary who captured Ryuto before, Andrei. At this time, he was trying to move as quietly as possible. At the same time, he was observing his feet, afraid that he would step on something small that would make a sound. At this time, the classrooms in the teaching building were all locked. There were no students around, which created a good opportunity for Andrei and the others to capture him. Just when he came to the corner near the bathroom on the 3rd floor, Andrei suddenly narrowed his eyes and vaguely saw a figure hiding in the corner. Although most of the figure was hiding behind the wall, a corner of a boy's uniform was exposed. Needless to say, it was obvious who it was. He actually wanted to hide there. Too naive. Should I say, as expected of a kid. After observing the surrounding terrain, Andrei immediately crouched down and crawled forward in a nearly crawling posture. This special movement method guaranteed that he would not make a sound. Fortunately, the moment he rushed out, he caught the kid by surprise and caught him. 3, 2, 1. Move. When he came to the corner less than half a meter away from the corner of the wall, Andrei suddenly rushed towards the corner, with the momentum of a tiger pouncing on a sheep. At this moment, he seemed to see Ryuto being quickly caught by him and falling to the ground crying for his parents. However, when Andrei pounced forward and hugged the target in the school uniform, he knew that he had been tricked. Because what appeared in Andrei's eyes was not a living target. It was a mannequin in a school uniform. Shit. Before the mercenary could quickly retreat, a figure had already descended from the sky and swung his elbow towards the back of Andrei's head. Of course, the premise of this theory was that Ryuto didn't have an equipment slot that could allow him to take out his equipment at any time. Unfortunately, he did. At this moment, Long Do, who stood up from the ground, sighed. He turned around and ran towards the 4th floor without looking back. Originally, he didn't want to use a gun to finish him off, but now it was troublesome. In Ryuto's plan, he should be able to finish off the first enemy with an ambush, and there was no need to use a gun. On one hand, the gun would make noise and expose his position, and on the other hand, he didn't have a lot of bullets. When he took the pistol from Yamamoto, the number of bullets in the magazine wasn't full. There were only 4 bullets in the magazine. After killing Andrei with 1 shot, there were only 3 bullets left in the magazine, and this number could only be described as not optimistic. There were only 3 bullets, but there were still 2 enemies. With Ryuto's amateur level of gun skills, unless it was close range like before, he didn't have the confidence to take down 2 professional mercenaries with just 3 bullets. Just as Ryuto ran toward the 4th floor, the other 2 mercenaries quickly came to the location of the gunshot. It's hopeless. A 7.62mm bullet, shot at a very close range. The target should have a Black Star-type pistol. After seeing Andrei lying on the ground with blood oozing out of his abdomen, one of the mercenaries quickly went over to check the wound, and then shook his head at the other mercenary. Since the target has a gun, then he should continue to fight back and won't run. If that's the case, we just need to move together. Although one of their teammates died on the spot, the 2 mercenaries didn't seem to be affected at all, and they calmly formed a small team and continued to chase upstairs. After all, they had seen too many situations like this on the battlefield. Moreover, knowing that the other party had firearms, the 2 mercenaries also took out some real weapons, such as the special ejecting dagger hidden in their trousers. The blade of this ejector dagger was first installed on the handle, and when needed, it could fly out at a speed of more than 60 km per hour under the action of a spring. On special battlefields where firearms were inconvenient, this thing was the favorite of the mercenaries, and it was impossible to defend against within 10 meters. But for the current Ryuto, compared to the 2 mercenaries chasing downstairs, the most troublesome thing was the beautiful figure that suddenly appeared in front of him. Everything happened in an instant. When Ryuto just walked to the corridor on the 4th floor and was about to head to the 5th floor, a beautiful girl carrying a backpack leisurely walked down the stairs. Who is it? Instinctively, Ryuto immediately raised his gun, but he saw a familiar face. The moment he saw the face, Dragon Head was stunned. The long brown hair that was as soft as clouds, the beautiful face that exuded radiance like the Holy Mother, and the huge slime that almost broke through the binding of the clothes. Even in this world, there weren't many beauties of this level. The only one who possessed all of these characteristics was Yun Yen in Yujian. This was Dori First High School, and Yun Yen Tsukini was a third-grade student in this school, so it was normal for her to be in the school at this time. But why? Why did this young lady come to this remote old teaching building at this time? Just when Ryuto looked at Yun Yen as if he saw a ghost. She was also stunned for a moment, then she looked at the black muzzle in Ryuto's hand. After a moment, Yun Yen said with a smile, "Student, are you playing a gunfight game? But it's not too good to point a gun at others in this place." Before Yun Yen could finish speaking, a green beret could be vaguely seen at the bottom of the stairs behind them. It was obvious that the two mercenaries had caught up to them. Chapter 62. Now, there was Yuejian Yun Yen blocking the way in front, and those two mercenaries blocking the way behind. Ryuto, who was stuck in the middle of the stairs, could only sigh helplessly. He quickly put away his pistol and rushed over to Yun Yen and carried her up to the rooftop. This is not right. Everything happened too quickly. When Ryuto carried Yun Yen in a princess carry, she instinctively wanted to press a button, but when she saw Ryuto's serious expression, she immediately stopped. Words can deceive people, so can expressions, but the nervousness of being in the middle of a battle is definitely not something that can be faked. Therefore, Yun Yen immediately sensed that this boy did not want to do anything strange to her, but wanted to carry her to escape. Wait, isn't this Ryuto Kiryu? At this moment, Yun Yen finally recalled the face that had attracted a lot of attention today and the name that seemed to have been cursed. After all, in Dori No. 1 High School, Ryuto's fame was actually on par with Colored Glaze, Yun Yen and other famous people, but they were all infamous. In Yun Yen's impression, Ryuto Kiryu should be a big hoodlum with triangular eyes, aquiline nose, sharp chin, monkey cheeks, ferocious eyes, ferocious face, and yellow hair. However, the person who was carrying her and running forward with all his might was not such a person. Now Ryuto's face was solemn, showing off his handsome facial features incisively and vividly. Moreover, his eyebrows were filled with the valiant aura of a warrior on the battlefield. Originally, Ryuto's appearance was not bad, and now that his charm was at the level of LV2, excellent passerby, he naturally did not look annoying. Moreover, the environment that suddenly became tense provided Yun Yen with a feeling similar to the suspension bridge effect, which made her feel a little excited all of a sudden. This feeling, could it be? After realizing that her emotions were stirred up for the first time in a long time, Yun Yen took a deep breath and whispered in Ryuto's ear, "Ryuto classmate, can you explain what is going on?" Yun Yen's voice was gentle and melodious, especially when it sounded in his ear. He could feel the heat sweeping across his earlobe, making him feel like he was in the clouds. However, Long Do, who was on the run, was in no mood to enjoy the woman's gentleness. Instead, he hurriedly replied, "There are two kidnappers chasing after me. This teaching building has become a battlefield. You must leave immediately." As he spoke, he had already carried Yun Yen to the stairs at the other end of the building. At the same time, the two mercenaries had already appeared at the staircase. Both parties were only separated by a few hundred meters of the corridor and looked at each other from afar. "Go down. Don't look back, and don't tell anyone about this." After putting Yun Yen down at the stairs, Ryuto reminded her while quickly pointing at the road below, indicating that she should leave quickly, and he was ready to run up the stairs. "Wait. Ryuto classmate." But before the dragon head ran 2 steps, Yun Yen suddenly reached out and grabbed his sleeve. This. Long Do was scared out of his wits because the two mercenaries were closing in on him at a speed visible to the naked eye. He could only continue to say seriously, "Miss, this is not a joke. Hurry. I know the two kidnappers are real, and you are really being chased, so you don't have to run. I can help you solve the problem." "What? You can help me solve the problem?" After hearing Yun Yen's words, Ryuto's head couldn't help but have a big question mark. Although in the original work, Yunyan was also a miss of the same level as colored glaze. She didn't seem to have a guard like 16 Nights dancing costume by her side. But at this moment, Yunyan quickly took out a small button switch from her pocket and pressed it without hesitation. After completing this action, the two mercenaries were already more than 50 meters away. They were about to pounce on the two. SK, no way. Seeing that the other party was quickly rushing over, Ryuto quickly blocked Yunyan behind him, and he took out his pistol and pointed in the direction of the two people. In the long and narrow corridor, the conflict was about to break out. But in the next moment, something that Ryuto and the mercenaries didn't expect suddenly appeared. Buzz buzz buzz. Buzz 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 buzz. Accompanied by a rapid buzzing sound, two multi-axis rotor miniature drones that were slightly larger than a football quickly appeared beside Yunyan, and the muzzle below was aimed at the mercenaries rushing over. What? Before the two mercenaries could react, a barrage of bullets had already blasted their bodies. For these two experienced mercenaries, if it was only the small pistol in Ryuto's hand, they were still confident that they could dodge it. But these two drones were different. In this small corridor, hundreds of bullets directly hit their bodies, and they fell to the ground on the spot. When Ryuto saw this scene, he was stunned. It wasn't until now that he remembered that in the Tsukujiri Consortium, a multinational company famous for high-tech, the core field was all kinds of intelligent machinery. From automated mechanical arms, and other automated mechanical and electrical equipment, to mechanical birds, mechanical dogs, drones, intelligent butlers, and so on, this was the main business of the Tsukujiri Consortium. For such a high-tech company, it was only natural that they would have extremely high standards for the security of their young Mississippi. Therefore, it wasn't that Yunyan didn't have bodyguards, but her bodyguards didn't need to be around at all times. They could fly over at any time to protect her. When she saw Ryuto's dumbfounded expression, Yunyan raised the remote control in her hand and explained with a smile, "Don't worry, the shots were all low-dose anesthetic bullets, they won't kill anyone, probably." Although the words "probably" made people feel that it was quite unreliable, the mercenary kidnapping incident was unexpectedly solved. Oh my God, there were such special bodyguards around Yunyan. This was a scene that didn't appear in the original work. After glancing at the two real guys floating around Yunyan, Ryuto couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. If his action of rushing over to pick up Yunyan was deemed as an intentional assault, then the one who would be taking a bullet right now would probably be him. Okay, Ryuto, since I helped you, then you should explain to me what is going on, right? I'm very, very interested in this, so. At this time, Yunyan came to Ryuto in high spirits, waved her hand, and then showed him a crazy smile. Chapter 63. For the vast majority of people, the scene just now was obviously surreal. Who has ever been chased by kidnappers in school and fought with them with a gun? People who would answer, yes, should be rare. After all, this should only be seen in movies, TV series, novels, and manga. But if such a scene really appeared in front of the eyes of ordinary people, then they would be shocked to the point that their legs would go soft. Fear and confusion would quickly break through the mental limit, and they could only be confused like a headless fly. However, there were very few people who would be excited by this surreal scene. They would be excited to be trapped in a situation where they could die at any time. This kind of excitement would lead to a crazy increase in the amount of dopamine secretion in the brain, resulting in excitement and joy emotions. Very coincidentally, Yunyan in Tsukiji was such a person. After understanding that Ryuto was really being chased, Yunyan felt her heart beat so fast for the first time, and her face became red. Excited, so excited. Although on the surface Yunyan still maintained the demeanor of a young lady, her heart was already blooming with joy. It must be known that this kind of scene was not something that anyone could see, especially for Yunyan, who had been well protected since childhood. She was an ordinary girl who had never been kidnapped. Of course, Yunyan was not a person who simply pursued this kind of excitement. She was most concerned about the sudden surge of inspiration in her brain after sufficient stimulation. Inspiration like a spring. Suddenly, she wanted to take out a pen and write down the legendary scene in a book. Her desire to write was unprecedentedly high. As a future famous writer, self-proclaimed, Yoon Yen always thought that she needed a variety of experiences to enrich her experience, to be able to write a truly moving story. People who have never experienced a hail of bullets, can they write that kind of life on the battlefield? People who have never been kidnapped, can they write that kind of pain and helplessness? People who have never held hands with a girl, can they write that kind of blushing and heartbeat in love? Of course not, at least in Yoon Yen's view it was not possible. At this moment, a huge inspiration suddenly gushed out from Yoon Yen's mind. Ryuto Kiryu was, without a doubt, a man with extraordinary experiences and a man who lived a different life from ordinary people. Being in the dark and walking on the tip of a knife, one's head could fall to the ground at any time. Death would be a worthy death. Corpses would be strewn on the streets or sink into the Gulf of Tokyo. However, it was precisely this sense of danger and excitement that made his life seem more realistic and could arouse the interest of readers. It was hard to say whether the reader's interest would be piqued, but Yoon Yen's interest was completely piqued. However, this kind of interest was not a bad thing for Ryuto. After all, Yoon Yen was a companion that he wanted to rope in, and she was also one of his dream lovers. That's right, I won't pretend anymore. I just want her body, Ryuto Kiryu. With such feelings, Ryuto roughly described his experience with the Heavenly Eye group. At the same time, he also took a look at Yoon Yen's stats. As expected, Yoon Yen's stats were quite exaggerated, although her 3 measurements were also exaggerated. Cough cough. Name, Yoon Yen Tsukimake's age, 17 stats, Intelligence LV2, Constitution LV1, Courage LV3, Insight LV1, Charm LV5. Born with extreme charm and professional-level guts, this was the full picture of Miss Tsukimake's stats. In the process of Ryuto's description, Yoon Yen looked rather calm, but the smile on her face became more and more obvious. I see. After hearing about Long Do's encounter, Yoon Yen suppressed her excitement and tried her best to say seriously, "You're being chased by people from the Heavenly Eye group. You're really unlucky." That's right. If it wasn't for your help, Yoon Yen, I would probably have to take some risks to solve it. Ryuto was actually quite surprised by Yoon Yen's help. After all, in the original Red Photo Album 2, No Survivors, Yoon Yen wasn't the kind of female lead that often involved fighting. Yoon Yen was the second female lead. In order to show the difference between her and the first female lead, The Colored Glaze, the plot for Yoon Yen was completely different from The Colored Glaze. Because Yoon Yen's dream was to become a writer, every time the players met with her, it was in the library or bookstore. The things they discussed were also rather relaxed, youthful topics. In Yoon Yen's personal line, in order to let her experience the life of a civilian and obtain writing qualifications, the players took Yoon Yen, who had no social experience, away from home. It was commonly known as eloping. While the two avoided the pursuit of the Tsukujiri Consortium, they experienced a journey from the east to the westernmost part of Japan. After many difficulties on the journey, Yoon Yen finally grew up, and the novel she wrote also had the power to be deeply rooted in people's hearts. In the end, they reached a happy ending. Compared to The Colored Glaze line, which often involved the survival of Japan and the confrontation between black and white, the Yoon Yen line was much smaller, more youthful, and more warm. This kind of personal line was more like a love drama in the traditional sense, rather than the urban love adventure action mystery science fiction historical drama in The Colored Glaze line. But this kind of description focused on youth also made the players not know as much about Yoon Yen as The Colored Glaze. What was Yoon Yen's daily life like? Was she threatened in any way? What was the conflict between the Tsukujiri Consortium and the Tenmu group that she belonged to? How was the conflict resolved in the end? And no matter at the end of the line, the game would enter the Ni Hanin Temple incident, which was the major event where Tenmu Iam decided to turn the entire Japan into a sea of fire and destroy the country. This incident was the climax of the game. In The Colored Glaze line and the third female storyline, the protagonists were involved in the whole process, but only Yoon Yen did not participate in the story. She only vaguely mentioned a few words. Therefore, Ryuto's impression of Yoon Yen in Tsukujiri was actually different from the first and third female protagonists. He would think that she was more civilian and less violent. However, Yunyen's next request subverted Ryuto's understanding of her. After straightening her expression, Yunyen asked in a serious tone, "Ryuto-san, actually, I have something to ask you." "You don't have to be so polite, Yunyen, just say what you want." "Then I'll say it directly, I want you." "Ah, that's too rash. Actually, I want you to be my research sample." "Sorry, there seems to be something wrong with my ears or my head. Can you say it again in detail?" After hearing Yunyen's words, Ryuto reached out to dig his ears and patted his head, as if suspecting that there was something wrong with his ears or his head. "I hope you can be my research sample. I want to study your life, your past, present, and future experiences in order to write a novel that can shock people." Seeming to understand what Ryuto was surprised about, Yunyen expressed her thoughts in clearer words. Chapter 64. Words had the power to shock people's hearts. Anyone who had read Crystal Duckweed Rose, A Tanuki's Chronicles of Buddha, Young A. Bing, Elves Are Not Creatures in a Pond, and other literary masterpieces would have felt the shock that went deep into their souls. However, such words were not something that ordinary people with ordinary experiences could write. Therefore, Yunyen's intention at this time was obvious. She wanted to observe Ryuto's past, present, and future life experience in order to write a real masterpiece. "I plan to name this book with you as the protagonist, starting from the Tokyo villain. What do you think?" When talking about her novel plan, Yunyen's eyes flashed brightly, as if there was an entire universe in her pupils. On the other hand, Long Do didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he replied, "That. How can I not be crushed? Can you leave me a whole corpse?" "I see. Then let's change it to Extreme Watchman." "No, I can't say the reason, but in short, this name won't do." "Then let's Extreme Lord, Breaking Extreme Path, Extreme Path Continent, the years I was a corpse collector in Tokyo Bay." Stop. Don't think about the name. In short, you want to get inspiration for writing by observing me, right? But this will be dangerous. Are you sure you want to do this? When Yunyen began to excitedly jump out book titles that were full of déjà vu, Ryuto reached out and stopped her. Although he planned to let Yunyen join his team, Ryuto only wanted her body, and he also wanted to use the power of the Tsukumori Consortium behind her. But if he wanted to let Yunyen observe him at close range, it would inevitably involve her in some dangerous moments, such as just now. But Yunyen shook her head and said firmly, "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. And you saw it just now, I'm not a weak person." When Yunyen pressed a button just now, the two drones flew over and buzzed. It could be seen that she wasn't trying to maintain her image, but that it was the truth. In that case, Ryuto agreed to Chan Yushan's request and became her observation specimen. Although this title didn't sound very nice, the things involved weren't complicated. Normally, Yunyen would at most chat with Ryuto from time to time, or record some of his life through the reconnaissance drone as material for her writing. On the other hand, Yunyen would pay Long Do half of the book's royalties as the standard fee, although Long Do didn't expect to get this money. After all, in Ryuto's opinion, Yunyen's writing skills were really weird. For the next 2 hours, Ryuto was dragged by Yunyen to the rooftop to enjoy the novel she wrote before. The two sat very close to each other while reading. Ryuto could smell the sweet fragrance around him at any time, and he could even see Yunyen's long eyelashes. However, even so, Ryuto's expression was still very stiff because the things written in the notebook in his hand really didn't know how to give a fair evaluation. In fact, Yunyen's academic performance was quite excellent, and her literary foundation was okay, but her brain circuit in writing was a bit strange. For example, in the novel, the female protagonist chose to buy silver jewelry from a silverware shop in order to make chocolate for her crush. She melted the silver and plated it on the chocolate, giving it a beautiful silver luster. Speaking of which, was this not murder? Similar strange brain circuits were everywhere in Yunyen's book. It was obviously a youth school romance novel, but suddenly, the next page appeared a mutant and the ancient god Cthulhu. After that, the male and female protagonists were recognized as the strongest mutants in history. They sat on high-tech robots that appeared out of nowhere and started a battle with the ancient god Cthulhu. While fighting, they fell in love and dealt with as many as 7 or 8 romantic relationships. From time to time, there would be some family comedies. The most frightening thing was that all of the above descriptions appeared in just 10 pages of content. After reading Yunyen's novel, Ryuto's thought was, is this really something that a normal person can write? Even if I throw a cat to roll on the keyboard, it would be more logical. But in front of Yunyen, who was extremely excited because she found a soulmate, he still couldn't say such words to spoil the mood. Amidst this incomparable torment, 2 hours finally passed. The sky gradually darkened, and the Dory First High School activity time was about to end. By the way, I've actually been too embarrassed to show the content of these novels to anyone. It's great that Ryuto is here. See you tomorrow. When Yunyen was about to leave the old teaching building, she finally turned her head and smiled at Ryuto. There was a sense of relief in her tone. When he saw senior sister Yunyan smile, Long Do suddenly felt that his 2 hours of suffering were not in vain. At the very least, his relationship with this great beauty had become much closer. Well, next, he had to take care of some loose ends. After sending off Yunyen, Ryuto called Sensible to inform him that he was safe and that he was still alive. Then, he called Narukai and the others in and let them take care of the aftermath. After all, in this old teaching building, there were 2 mercenaries and a corpse lying in the toilet waiting to be disposed of. Since these guys were in this line of work, they should have expected what would happen if they failed. Therefore, Ryuto was too lazy to deal with these trivial matters. Instead, he directly handed them over to his driver, Narukai Otani. If there were no accidents, they would be buried in the forest tonight and would never have a chance to see the light of day again. Of course, this was not the end, or rather, it was just the beginning. With Ryuto's understanding of Tenmu Ayam, she would not be discouraged by this small matter. Instead, she would continue to attack him fiercely. But in any case, as Ryuto returned to Kamishimachi in his black car, this incomparably magnificent day finally came to an end. How many things had happened today, even Ryuto almost couldn't remember. So tired, bastard. Is going to school such a terrible thing in this world? As night fell, Ryuto laid on the bed in his room after a quick dinner. He looked like a salted fish that had exhausted its energy. Young Master Ryuto, are you asleep? Just when Ryuto was about to lie down and rest early, Consultant Fujiki's familiar voice sounded from behind the door. I'm not asleep, what's the matter? Nothing big, it's just that the group leader wants to meet with you. He seems to have something to talk to you about. Oh, then, what? Group leader? Rulon Group leader Hitoshi Kazuma? My father? Want to meet with me? When he heard this sudden news, Ryuto's face couldn't help but show a complicated expression. Chapter 65. For the current Rulon Group's leader, Kazuma Kirishima, Ryuto's feelings were somewhat complicated. In Red Album 2, No One Survived, he stayed in prison the whole time, and he didn't even have a portrait. At most, he was just a passerby. But in this world, Kazuma was a living person, and he was the father of this body. The old saying said that blood is thicker than water, but although Ryuto's body was Kazuma's blood, his soul was not. Under such circumstances, if Long Do were to call a stranger father, it would be somewhat awkward. However, now that the blood father had appointed him to visit the prison, Ryuto couldn't choose not to go, so he could only go to the Tokyo Nesting Duck Prison. So early in the morning of the next day, Ryuto happily skipped class and got into the car to go to the Nesting Duck Prison. According to the original plan, today Ryuto should be looking for his last partner, Takayama Masato. But since his father had something to look for, then he should go and visit him. After all, he was the father of this body. Soon after, Ryuto came to the Nesting Duck Prison, located in the suburbs of Tokyo, which was also a place where people in the underworld were afraid to talk about. Some reports could be seen from many places, saying that the prison conditions in Japan were better than many places, which was indeed a fact. First of all, the 3 meals in the prison were guaranteed, and the inside was clean and tidy, safe and orderly, which could be said to be very thoughtful. But the members of the extreme path who really squatted in there knew that the prison in Japan destroyed people's spirit and caused indelible psychological damage. In this damn place, even looking at the guards will be punished. Looking up during the meal will be punished. Closing your eyes when you shouldn't be closing your eyes will be punished. Opening your eyes when you shouldn't be opening your eyes will still be punished. On the first day, I was asked to memorize the entire prison manual. It stipulated how my feet should be raised, how much angle should I raise my hand, and when I sleep, I can only lie on my side or face up. I can't lie face down, and I can't cover my face. Otherwise, I will be punished. In any case, it is very, very oppressive inside. Without the permission of the prison guards, you are not allowed to do anything other than breathe. The above description came from the personal experience of a senior of the Rulon group who had been in the nesting duck prison for 5 years. At that time, his vivid descriptions and painful tone had left a deep impression on Ryuto. However, that team leader Tong Shang-yima's sentence was not a short 5 years, but 6 times the sentence of 30 years. Because he was charged with multiple crimes such as serious intentional injury, intentional homicide, and assault on the police, Ima had a high probability of being sentenced to death, but because of his good relationship with a lawyer, it was changed to 30 years in prison. But from a realistic point of view, 30 years of imprisonment was not much different from the death penalty. After all, many death row prisoners in Japan had been in prison for decades without being executed. In the end, they still died of old age. When Ryuto arrived at the heavily guarded prison, he filled out all the forms and waited for another hour before he was let through the door. The prison guards obviously did not welcome Ryuto's arrival, but after all, he was visiting according to the formal procedures, so they could only give permission. Wait here. After coldly leaving such a sentence, the guard stood next to him and stared at Ryuto with the eyes of a prisoner. From the appearance, Ryuto's dyed yellow hair did indeed look like a delinquent youth. In addition, he had a close blood relationship with the prison's big criminal, Tong Shang-yima, which naturally made the guards nervous. In this visiting room, separated by an iron window in the middle, not long after, the opposite door was slowly opened, and a tall figure walked in with steady steps. In his memory, Ryuto's father's face was actually a bit vague, but he vaguely remembered that his figure was very tall, giving people a feeling of indomitable spirit. But now in the prison, even if Yima was wearing a prison uniform and had a buzz cut, the expression on his face and the aura on his body was still the same as in his memory, and he walked with a straight back. A man should be like this, regardless of whether it was good or bad, indomitable spirit. A dragon trapped in the shallows is still a dragon, and will not become a shrimp crawling because of this. You're here, today seems to be Tuesday, don't you have class? When the Rulon group's team leader sat on the stool, facing his son through the iron window, his first sentence was unexpectedly this. For some reason, Yima gave Ryuto the feeling that he did not feel like he was in prison, but like he was in his daily work state and suddenly saw his son appear in front of him. Ha 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 ha. So Ryuto could not help but laugh, and the austere atmosphere in the visiting room became a lot more lively. Sorry, today I slightly skipped class, you won't spank me, right? If there was no iron window in the middle, maybe I would do that. That's really comforting. For the first time I feel that prison is a good place. For a time, the father and son actually chatted like this, giving the feeling that they were chatting at home, completely ignoring the serious atmosphere in the prison and the surrounding guards. However, when he heard Ryuto's voice getting louder and louder, the guard who was responsible for monitoring him next to him could not help but say, "Hey! Lower your voice, you can't make noise in prison." Ah! In an instant, Ryuto turned his head slightly and looked at the guard with a sharp gaze. The current Ryuto was not the ordinary person who just crossed over. In just 3 days, he confronted Tenmu Ayam, fought with the cat house, threw Sakata out of the 2nd floor in public, killed the mercenaries with his own hands, and so on. After experiencing these big events that ordinary people could not imagine in their lifetime, his momentum has gradually become like a big boss, like a cop that leaped over the Dragon Gate. Therefore, this gaze was so sharp that the guard who was glanced at could not help but shrink back, as if an invisible knife had been placed on his neck. "That's enough, don't make it difficult for him," he is just doing a job to support his family. After noticing Long Do's actions, Ima slowly opened his mouth to stop him. It's okay, I don't plan to do anything, don't worry. You don't plan to do anything? Or have you already done it? I've heard about the incident with Sakata. Although Yima was a little happy to see his grown-up son after a long time, he still put on a serious expression and mentioned the business he wanted to discuss with his son. Chapter 66. 3 days ago, the young master of the Rulon group, Ryuto Kiryu, single-handedly resolved Sakata Minoru's rebellion. Not only was this miraculous deed widely spread outside, even the people in the Nest Duck prison were secretly discussing it. With Ikima's identity, he naturally had his own channels to collect information, and he was more aware of the ins and outs of the matter. After understanding that his father was about to get down to business, Ryuto also nodded solemnly and replied, "Indeed, after all, there are some things that have to be done. I understand, you were also forced to do so. I can only blame myself for not dealing with things properly before coming in." As for Sakata's rebellion, Ikima actually didn't expect it beforehand, and now that he thought about it, he felt some lingering fear. Although his son was sitting in front of him, alive and kicking, Ikima could also imagine how much bloodshed he had experienced before coming here alive. If Sakata had colluded with outsiders, then the first thing he would have done was to eliminate Ryuto. But Ryuto was not killed, but instead, he killed Sakata. This ability was far beyond Ikima's understanding of his son. "I've always wanted you to stay away from extreme Tao, stay away from the Rulon group, and live an ordinary life, but now it seems that I was too naive." Having said that, Ikima couldn't help but sigh, and at the same time, he unconsciously shook his head. Ikima lost his parents when he was young and spent his youth in an orphanage. Later, he was adopted by an extreme Tao boss, and since then, he embarked on the path of extreme Tao for his adoptive father. As for his life, although he knew that he had always been on the wrong path, he never regretted it. Because from the beginning to the end, Ikima had no other choice. Whether it was because of friendship or loyalty, he could only go down this path to the end. Once you entered the extreme Tao industry, you could not leave it for the rest of your life. It was precisely because he knew that this path was a dead end that Ikima did everything he could to get Ryuto out of it. But now it seemed that this was impossible. Even if Ichiro was dead, as long as the Rulon group was still around, there would be people who wanted Ryuto's life. Even if the Rulon group was gone, many people would not let go of Ryuto. He still had to die. However, after hearing his father's words, Ryuto shook his head and smiled. "You're right. It's just that the enemy is too strong." The enemy? The one behind Sakata? Although Yima didn't know about the existence of eternal concubine Amami, but from the matter of him going to prison, he could also feel that there was a huge invisible hand behind him pushing everything to happen. "That's right. Your imprisonment should also be caused by that person. Unless we can match her, we won't be able to live according to our own wishes." At this point, Ryuto couldn't help but look up as if he wanted to see the distant sky through the ceiling of the visitation room. Whether it was Ichiro's predicament, Ryuto's predicament, or Colored Glaze's predicament, in the end, it was caused by the lack of strength. Only with sufficient strength could humans freely choose their own way of living and not be forced to go with the flow by the general trend. Suddenly, Ryuto said, "Pops, I will find a way to get you out of here. You shouldn't continue to be imprisoned like this. I'm afraid it's a bit difficult." It's not a question of whether it's difficult or not, but whether it's necessary. In this cold, nesting duck prison, Ryuto stood up and looked at his father for the last time. He smiled and said, "I'll go first. I hope to see you outside soon." After saying this, Ryuto looked at the guards with a, "Are you trying to break out of prison?" Under the vigilant gaze of the guards, he swaggered out of the door and enjoyed the prestige of a gangstar. Wait. Originally, Long Do planned to say, "The wind is bleak and the water is cold. My son has left and never returned. He left behind a handsome back and disappeared." Who knew that Ima would call out to him at the last moment? "Is there anything else?" After all, the person who interrupted him was his father, so Ryuto could only obediently turn his head and look. Although your physical fitness is good, you haven't received proper martial arts training since you were young, so you can't use your strength. Go find an old man called Furumoki Sotaro. He is the master of Furumoki-style martial arts, and is also my master. He can train you to be a talent." After throwing down these words, Ima also stood up from the stool, leaving behind a back view that said, "The wind is blowing and the water is cold. This old man will leave and never return." He directly left Long Do's line of sight. "Good guy. You're still the best at acting." After being intimidated by Ima's handsome back, Long Do was also escorted out by the guards as if he was a plague. Furumoki Sotaro is his father's teacher? On the way back, Ryuto kept thinking about what Ichiro said. Actually, even without Ichiro's reminder, Ryuto knew where his problem was. Although he had a LV3 physique, professional expert level physical fitness, but in other aspects, he was only at the level of a normal delinquent. A person's combat ability was mainly composed of physique, mentality, combat experience, and combat skills. Other than the first two, Ryuto was a complete mess in the last two. His fists were not good, and he did not know how to use knives or pistols. It was a waste of his good physique. Let alone the mercenaries from yesterday, even if he faced a grandmaster of combat who was not as good as him, there was a high probability that he would not be their opponent. After all, the other person had seriously trained. His imitation of the tortoise fist style was completely like a monkey show to a real martial artist. If he really fought, he would be broken. So Ryuto also thought about whether or not he should find a dojo to train. Who knew that his father would recommend him a master who sounded amazing? Furumoki-style martial arts grandmaster, Furumoki Sotaro. Good guy. Looking at the aura of this sect, looking at the name of this grandmaster, it felt like a hidden master. Suddenly, the image of an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion appeared in Long Do's mind. He was sitting alone in a dojo, meditating. Narukai, mobilize all the intelligence under the Rulon group, and search the entire Tokyo area for an old man called Furumoki Sotaro. Yes, I will go immediately. So after getting off the car, Ryuto immediately ordered Narukai Otani to mobilize his brothers to search for the old man. After all, the Rulon group's intelligence network was very powerful. It should not be difficult to find a master with a name. In fact, it was not difficult. On the same night, Ryuto received the whereabouts of the Grandmaster, Furumoki Sotaro. And according to his brother's report, the Grandmaster was now dancing in a nightclub. Chapter 67. The night was special for the Japanese. It was a good time to free themselves from the busy work and take the initiative to indulge in the bright neon lights. Especially at night in Tokyo, it was usually bustling with BMWs and cars. Even in the early morning of the next day, many main streets were still brightly lit. Among them, Ginza was undoubtedly an area rich in nightlife. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, it was the time for bars and nightclubs in Ginza to open. At night, colorful neon lights and fluorescent lights flickered, as if drowning people in the dazzling light and shadow. Just as the night in Ginza gradually became deep, a low-key black car slowly drove to a karaoke hall between 7 Chosum and 8 Chosum. There were quite a few high-end nightclubs in the Ginza area, and this hula jump bar karaoke hall was relatively low-end, so it also gathered a lot of embarrassed guests. Second Hokage, this is the place. As Narukai Otani opened the door, his direct superior, Ryuto, slowly walked out of the car and stood at the door of the hula jump bar karaoke hall. Before entering the door, he had already heard the noise of the dance floor and saw various neon lights flashing with psychedelic colors. There were many similar karaoke halls in Kamashicho, but Ryuto didn't come here to dance. The Furumoki school master actually likes to come to this kind of place. It's hard to understand. After shaking his head, Ryuto walked into the karaoke hall with Narukai. The noisy music, the crazy dancing crowd, such a place was a bit noisy for Ryuto, and he didn't like it. But in order to find the Furumoki school master who taught his father, Furumoki Sotaro, he still came here with a gift. Speaking of Furumoki Sotaro, this person was actually not difficult to find. People who often hang around in Ginza have probably seen such a strange old man. When Ryuto saw that figure on the lively dance floor, it was not difficult to understand why he had left a deep impression on so many people. The appearance of this Furamaki sect grandmaster was very different from what he had imagined. From the outside, Furamaki Sotaro looked like an ordinary old Japanese man. He had a short stature and a thin body. His face had a pointy mouth and monkey cheeks. He had the face of a monkey from Mount Amei. A wisp of a coquettish mustache was combed into the shape of a brush and hung down below his chin. His pale hair was tied into a bun, and the clothes he was wearing were also the old style of the workers of the Showa era. To put it bluntly, Furamaki Sotaro not only did not have the demeanor of a master, but his appearance and dressing were also out of place in this noisy nightclub. So much so that Ryuto and Narukai could see the old man swaying his body on the dance floor even from a distance. From the perspective of the 5 attributes, this Grandmaster's attributes were really a bit awkward. His attributes were like this: name, Furamaki Sotaro, age, 69 years old. Attributes: wisdom LV2, physique LV2, courage LV4, insight LV4, charm LV1. Well, in addition to his courage and eyesight, his physique did not look like a martial arts expert at all. Of course, it may be related to his age. This guy, is he really the leader's master? Seeing this Furamaki sect grandmaster wriggling on the dance floor, leaning toward a young lady wearing a short skirt next to him, and pretending to inadvertently rub her, but Narukai really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But Ryuto shook his head and said seriously, as the saying goes, a great hermit hides in the city. Maybe this grandmaster is the kind of master who has returned to the natural state. Is that so? But no matter how you look at it, he is just a lecherous old man. Don't say that, he still has skills. You see, he has been rubbing that woman's butt for so long, and the woman didn't notice it. Maybe this is a special cultivation method? However, before Ryuto's voice fell, the woman who was being taken advantage of by the Furamaki sect grandmaster seemed to notice something. She turned her head and pointed at the old man's nose and scolded. Second-generation leader. Isn't he discovered? And it looks like he is about to be slapped. Ahem, he was indeed discovered, but when this woman slaps him in a while, he will definitely use a handsome body movement to dodge. Pa! Before he finished speaking, a crisp slap had passed through the dance floor and entered the ears of Ryuto and Narukai. The woman who slapped the lecherous old man after being taken advantage of left, leaving only Furamaki Sotaro with a red mark on his face to continue swaying on the dance floor. Looking at his calm and composed appearance, it was as if nothing had happened and everything was just a dream. Such a thick-skinned grandmaster level really made people admire him. Second-generation leader. This. Don't talk to me for the time being, I have a headache. However, after seeing this scene, Ryuto couldn't help but walk to the bar and ask for a glass of fresh milk with ice. He raised his head and gulped it down. Don't ask why Ryuto asked for fresh milk with ice. It was because he was only 16 years old and was not an adult yet. He couldn't drink indiscriminately and could only drink milk to relieve his worries. Damn it! How could such a decent person like his father have such a lecherous master? And looking at his appearance, he didn't look like he could fight at all. What's going on? After drinking the milk in the glass, Ryuto put the glass on the table and sighed deeply. He seemed to feel that his future was full of troubles and that he had never met a decent person. However, he didn't know whether it was Ryuto's yellow hair that was too dazzling or the way he used milk to relieve his worries that was too funny. Therefore, the 2 young men who looked like gangsters immediately laughed and mocked. Little brat, if you like to drink milk so much, don't come to this kind of place. Go home and drink it. After hearing these words that were obviously looking for trouble, Narukai, who was standing behind Ryuto, couldn't hold it in anymore. Hey! Are the 2 of you looking for... Wait, don't do it here. Just as Narukai Otani was about to press the 2 young men on the table and teach them a lesson, Ryuto stopped him. Sorry. I was rude. I shouldn't have done it at this time. After understanding that the second-generation head was doing something important and didn't want to cause trouble, Narukai took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed his anger. However, Ryuto shook his head and moved his mouth towards Furamaki Sotaro, who was still having fun on the dance floor not far away. He smiled and said, "If you want to fight, don't fight here. Go to the dance floor and fight." "The dance floor? Ah, I understand." Narukai was also a smart person. He immediately understood what Ryuto meant. Therefore, he turned his head and grabbed the two young men's collars without hesitation. Like pulling two chicks, he threw them in the direction of Furamaki Sotaro. Chapter 68. Ryuto's meaning was obvious. Since it was the two punks who came to cause trouble first, he should just do it. Talking to them would be a waste of time. But since he already made a move, he might as well use this opportunity to test if the disco master had any real skills. After all, although Yima had learned a few moves from Furamaki Sotaro, it was many years ago. Who knows if this old man had Alzheimer's? Then wouldn't he be a perverted old man who only knows how to rub people's butts? Bang! Accompanied by two strange sounds, the two punks were grabbed by Narukai and thrown to the ground. Someone is fighting. Oh. Good fight. Hurry up and do it. Don't push, just watch the monkey. As the two punks were thrown to the ground, the young people who were dancing on the dance floor quickly moved away. Their faces were even filled with smiles and excitement. In this kind of nightclub, there would be people fighting almost every night. Everyone was used to it. Even the bodyguards in this la-la-ba disco were too lazy to care about the people who were fighting. At most, they would drag someone out and throw them into the garbage after they fell to the ground. Bastard! You! Pah! The two punks who were thrown to the dance floor by Narukai immediately tried to stand up and fight, but the former directly kicked the unlucky guy on the left in the chest. Although Narukai Otani's current identity was Ryuto's assistant and driver, he was still a veteran in the underworld for many years. Fighting was a common occurrence for him. His kick was fast and ruthless. It was full of momentum. It kicked the guy back like a rubber ball. The most important thing was that Furamaki Sotaro was right behind this guy. TSK. Seeing the punks coming towards him, Furamaki Sotaro couldn't do anything. A glimmer of light flashed through his seemingly old and dim eyes. His entire body flashed to the right with a strange movement technique, nimbly avoiding the unexpected disaster that was about to crash into him. This good guy. At this time, Ryuto, who was carefully watching Furamaki Sotaro, couldn't help but light up. Just now, the old man's movement was very smooth, like a fish in water. In a flash, he bypassed the crowd and arrived at a safe place. Expert, definitely an expert. Even though Long Do's eyes were fixed on the old man, he still couldn't see how the old man moved. He only felt the old man's figure disappear with a whoosh. Wait. Gone? Where did he go? When Long Do came to his senses, he realized that Tai Lang of Gu Mu Zong had already disappeared into the bustling crowd behind him. No, I have to catch up with him. So Ryuto's figure also quickly rushed in that direction. He directly used his hand to push the crowd and crazily squeezed inside. There were still cheers and shouts coming from the dance floor behind him. Obviously, Narukai was still happily educating the two punks. But Ryuto had already rushed out of the disco's back door in the blink of an eye and came to a slightly gloomy alley. In Tokyo, there were many maze-like alleys with many twists and turns. Many of them were gathering places for vagrants or punks, so ordinary people wouldn't casually enter here. The moment Long Do entered the alley, he saw a few rascals surrounding him and sucking on something. Then, those rascals looked at him strangely. Humph. If ordinary people were looked at by this group of drug addicts, they would inevitably feel fear. But Ryuto didn't hesitate to respond with a cold snort. In his view, this group of people with cerebral palsy hiding in the alley was a group of garbage. A group of social garbage that was dirty wherever they went. They were worse than animals. So Ryuto turned his head and looked at the other side of the alley. He just happened to see Furamaki Sotaro's figure that was about to disappear into the darkness. Don't think about running away. Unworthy old pervert master. Ryuto also quickly chased in the direction where Furamaki Sotaro ran. There were a lot of debris in the alley, and it was quite difficult to walk. But the old man Furamaki quickly ran forward as if he was used to it. If it was an ordinary person, he would definitely not be able to catch up with him. But Ryuto benefited from the physique of a professional. He still followed closely behind in this complicated environment. Sotaro ran, Ryuto chased. Sotaro continued to run, Ryuto continued to chase. The two of them, one running, one chasing, one running, inexplicably lasted for a full half an hour. That brat. Who is that brat? Why do you keep chasing after me and not letting me go? After running for half an hour, from Ginza Mokome to Ginza Ikaidakome, and then back to Ginza Mokome, the old man who was chased for more than a dozen streets finally couldn't take it anymore. Huff, huff, huff. Stop, stop. Suddenly, Furamaki Sotaro panted as he came to an open space next to a small alley. He stretched out his hand and made a stop gesture to Ryuto behind him. You finally stopped running? When the chase finally came to an end, although Long Do was also panting heavily, he was naturally much better off than a certain 69-year-old comrade. If you don't chase me, I won't run. If you don't run, why would I chase you? Is it because I've been rubbing against a girl's butt? This. After being rebuked by Ryuto, Furamaki frowned and could only take a deep breath. After taking a deep breath, the old man also returned to his usual master demeanor. He raised his chin and asked in a casual tone, "Young man, why are you looking for me?" Ryuto smiled and replied in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing, "I want to be your disciple." Disciple? I see. But why do I have to teach you? My father is Kirishima Kazuma, he asked me to come to you. There was a hint of pride in Long Do's voice when he said this. In his opinion, since Sotaro was his father's master, then the two of them should have some master and disciple relationship. He should not hesitate to accept him as a disciple. Who knew that Furamaki Sotaro's face changed when he heard the name and said in an angry tone, "It's him? That bastard asked you to come here. You're that bastard's son?" Different from before, Furamaki Sotaro's tone was obviously angry, which made Ryuto feel that something was wrong. That's not right. Logically speaking, aren't they master and disciple? Why would Furamaki Kazuma? I'll never forget that day. Just when Ryuto was puzzled and trying to figure out the relationship between the two, Furamaki Sotaro gritted his teeth and said seriously, he dared. He dared to steal my title of Master of the Dance Floor in the nightclub. He beat me in dancing. I'm not worthy of being his disciple. What? Before he finished speaking, Ryuto's expression became very interesting, and the image of the Rulon group in his mind was subtly distorted. Chapter 69. In Ryuto's heart, what was the image of the biological father and Rulon Group's leader, Kiryu Kazuma? First of all, he was an indomitable man. Whether it was his appearance, aura, or behavior, they all showed the word hardcore. People could not help but admire him. However, Furamaki Sotaro said that the disciple beat him in dancing, and also took away his title of Master of the Dance Floor in the nightclub? From this short sentence, there were actually a few very important information that could be extracted. First, Kiryu Kazuma went to nightclubs. Second, Kiryu Kazuma's disco dancing skills were very good. Third, Furamaki Sotaro was a stingy person. As if he saw Ryuto's expression of disbelief, Furamaki said indignantly, "What? You don't believe it?" "It's not that I don't believe it. It's just that it feels a little different from the old man I know." Humph, he only stopped after he got married and had a child. Before, he was completely serious on the surface, but the degree of inwardly flirtatious was not much worse than me. It seems like you still have some understanding of your inwardly flirtatious nature. How rare. Just like this, the old and the young found a place to sit down. Ryuto also listened to Furamaki talk about Kiryu Kazuma's past. According to the old man, Kazuma was not only the master of the dance floor, he played a lot of things. Not completely counting, Kazuma used to be a frequent customer of Kamishitachi's pub, massage parlor, bath parlor, PR club, casino, disco, KTV, performance hall, and other places. At the same time, he was also a master of baseball, golf, claw machine, arcade, boisé, mahjong, shogi, darts, table tennis, bowling, billiards, and other small entertainment games. That guy's favorite songs were Kamishitachi Snow Moonflower, Machine Kiss, Me 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 Me, and he especially liked to sing with the girls in the nightclub. He was so shameless. Speaking of this, Furamaki Sotaro showed a look of disdain. Because every time he went to the nightclub with Kazuma, the girls ignored him and squeezed to Kazuma's side. So that's how it is. That old-fashioned old man actually had such a wonderful past. After hearing so many stories about his biological father, Ryuto felt like crying and laughing. He originally thought that Kazuma was a decent person, who knew that he became decent after getting married and having children. He used to be this kind of a slut. However, since Yima grew up on the streets, and his adoptive father was a member of Extreme Path, it was only natural that he would be influenced by these things from a young age. What's more, after he got married, he decisively chose to live in seclusion and no longer wandered around, so Ryuto had no reason to blame him. As long as he didn't have a bunch of illegitimate children outside. After talking about the past, the old man couldn't help but sigh and said, "Speaking of which, that was a matter of 10 or 20 years ago. Time really flies." Since Kazuma founded the Rulon Group, he rarely contacted Sotaro. The two master and disciple could be said to have become strangers. But Sotaro didn't blame him because Sotaro knew that this was because Kazuma didn't want him to be involved in the grudges of Kamishitachi, so he took the initiative to distance himself. At this time, Ryuto also smiled and complimented, "Isn't that so? But seeing that you can still be energetic after being chased by me for more than 10 streets, old man will definitely be happy." "Humph, don't flatter me. Anyway, it must be that Kazuma has too many enemies outside, and he's afraid that you will be in trouble outside, so he thought of this old man. More or less. Anyway, there are indeed tens of thousands of people who want to kill me now. Can you teach me a few moves?" "You're exaggerating. In fact, it's not impossible to teach you, but it depends on whether you're cut out for it." Suddenly, Furamaki Sotaro stepped back a little and carefully looked at Ryuto from top to bottom. After all, the reason why Tong Shangyima was chosen by him to teach him the ancient Mu-style martial arts was mainly because of his extraordinary talent. If he was born in the Warring States period, Kazuma would definitely become a famous samurai. This was Sotaro's evaluation at that time. In fact, this was indeed the case. When Kazuma learned the Furamaki-style martial arts, he once swept the largest underground fighting arena in Kamishitachi, the Sai River Underground Fighting Arena, and created the legend of undefeated in 100 battles. When he met with Kazuma yesterday, Ryuto saw the attribute value and confirmed this point. After all, the physical attribute of the leader actually reached the LV4 physique, International Warrior level. Exaggerated physical attributes and rich combat experience, coupled with the Furamaki-style Palea martial art system, it was no wonder that Kazuma could make a name for himself in Kamishitachi. Even if there were 70 or 80 punks, they wouldn't be enough to beat him. After feeling Sotaro's doubts, Ryuto also straightened his back and said confidently, "I just chased you for more than a dozen streets. Do you think my physical attributes are not good enough?" With Ryuto's current LV3 physique, professional master level physical ability, not to mention other things, in this age group, it was definitely a monster level. After all, how many minors had the physical attributes of a professional player? But Sotaro shook his head and said, "There's nothing to say about physical attributes, but learning the Furamaki-style martial arts doesn't rely on strength, but on comprehension. Of course I know this, but my brain is still... Forget it, it's just average. It's useless to say more. In short, first punch me and see." After saying that, Sotaro stood up and walked to the side of the open space. "Me? Punch you?" Although Ryuto also followed, he was a bit surprised by this request. The Furamaki-style martial arts is a martial arts of self-defense. It is not proud of taking the initiative to attack. The strongest 3 profound skills of the style are all counterattacking skills. At this time, Sotaro put on the demeanor of a master and slowly said with his hands behind his back, "Martial arts of self-defense. Focused on running? This is my escape route." Something like that. Although he felt that the Furamaki-style martial arts had dropped to the extreme, Ryuto still obediently put on a posture and punched towards Sotaro, who happened to be in attack range. This punch didn't have any skill to speak of, but the speed and strength were very good. It reflected Ryuto's fighting principle of random punches can kill the master. But just as he punched out, the moment when he didn't hit the opponent, the short body in front of him suddenly flashed. Then Ryuto's fist stopped in mid-air. This. In that instant, Ryuto felt as if he was hit by a body-freezing technique. His whole body was stiff to the point that he couldn't move, and his breathing also suddenly stopped. This kind of complete stagnation lasted for more than a second. How is it? Can't move right? Seeing that Ryuto finally knelt down with his hands on his stomach, Sotaro on the side smiled and said, This is the profound skill of the Furamaki-style martial arts of the 3 profound skills. Its name is Tiger Fall. After not using this move for a long time, Sotaro's aura became completely different from before. He looked like a sect master. Chapter 70. Although the Furamaki sect was known for its martial arts of self-defense and did not specialize in active offensive moves, the power of this counterattack was terrifying enough. When Ryuto was hit by Furamaki Sotaro's ultimate skill, Tiger Fall, he felt his upper abdomen tighten. After a short pause, a sharp pain came from his abdomen, almost causing him to faint on the spot. In terms of physical strength, Sotaro, who was now close to 70 years old, clearly did not have the strength to beat Ryuto to such an extent with a single punch. The reason for such severe injuries and sudden stagnation was mainly due to the location and timing of the attack. According to Sotaro's words, this move could only hit one location, and that was the diaphragm in the middle of the human body. The diaphragm was the separation between the chest and the abdomen. Its purpose was to help the lungs breathe, helping the lungs to exhale and inhale air through contraction and expansion. The essence of ultimate skill, Tiger Fall, was a standard straight punch with a short distance and small movement. At the instant the enemy attacked, the abdomen would be hit first with the abdomen. If the location, angle, and strength were all suitable, the diaphragm that was hit would produce a transient spasm phenomenon, causing breathing to stop for an instant. The body would also become extremely stiff, and the enemy would be at their mercy. At the same time, because it was targeted at the moment the enemy attacked, the enemy would definitely charge forward when they attacked. It would feel like the enemy's upper abdomen was slammed into the fist, greatly increasing the power of the attack. Humans are creatures that have the least awareness of defense when they take the initiative to attack. Tiger Fall is to seize the moment of the opponent's attack to stop the attack and directly intercept the opponent's attack. This way we can achieve the goal of stopping the battle. Seeing Ryuto half kneeling on the ground, looking like he was in unbearable pain, Sotaro raised his head slightly and put on a harmonious posture of "I'm good by nature." After slowly standing up, Ryuto asked while panting, "Then, what if the enemy doesn't stop attacking?" "Then continue to hit him with Tiger Fall. Won't it stop after a few more hits? Isn't it a bad idea to continuously use such a vicious counterattack technique on others? Don't worry, this part of the body won't kill anyone. I've only used Tiger Fall 17 times on one person. Other than fainting a few times from the pain, he's fine." What a sect of martial arts of war. How kind. Ahem. Anyway, I've already taught you the basic principles behind profound meaning of skill, Tiger Fall. Now, go back and train on your own. Goodbye. Just as Ryuto was sighing about how weird the Furamaki sect was, Sotaro coughed slightly, indicating that his work was over. What? Wait a minute. That's it. Instantly, Ryuto asked in surprise, "So the lesson is over after a punch and a few words?" "What else? Your father learned it the same way back then." That's why I said that the cultivation of the Furamaki sect requires comprehension. After staring at Ryuto with a strange gaze, Sotaro turned around and said, "After a week, if you've learned Tiger Fall, come find me here. I'll teach you other profound meanings. If you can't learn them, then don't come. That means you're not cut out for this." Before he finished speaking, Furamaki Sotaro's skinny body had already disappeared into the alley like a gust of wind, leaving behind a stupefied Ryuto standing in the same spot. The cold wind blew, and the night in the small alley seemed so gloomy, just like Long Do's mood at this moment. When Long Do finally returned to the entrance of the disco, he met up with Ming Hai, who had been waiting by the car for a long time. Ming Hai was also shocked by his strange expression. "Second-generation leader? What's wrong with you? Why do you look like you've been?" "Strangely, nothing. Let's go back first. I'm a bit tired." "What happened? Could it be that he didn't manage to catch that old man? Or did something happen?" When Ryuto got into the car and the car slowly drove towards the headquarters of the Rulon Group, Narukai was still secretly observing his master's condition, afraid that something bad had happened to him. In fact, Ryuto didn't have any accidents, but he felt that his headache had increased. 1 week. To learn the Furamaki sect profound meaning, Tiger Fall, in 1 week, this was an almost impossible task in Ryuto's eyes. Although that punch didn't look complicated, it was still a high-level technique known as the profound meaning. To truly master it to the point where it could be used in actual combat was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. It wasn't strange that Itsuma could do this. He was a natural-born martial artist, someone who was truly skilled in martial arts. However, Ryuto wasn't. He knew himself best. To put it bluntly, Ryuto was actually an ordinary person who didn't have a system and was only hot-blooded. As an ordinary person, it was naturally impossible for him to have the qualities of a main character in a wuxia novel who could easily learn any kind of martial arts. He also wouldn't be able to learn things so quickly. That's right. There shouldn't be any items in the system that can help me practice martial arts, right? There shouldn't be, right? With a self-deprecating attitude, Ryuto casually opened the system that he was gradually becoming familiar with. However, the moment he opened his personal page, he suddenly discovered that there seemed to be an additional column of data that wasn't there before. Now, his personal attribute panel was like this: Name, Ryuto Kiryoage, 16 attributes, Wisdom LV1, Physique LV3, Courage LV2, Insight LV1, Charm LV3 title, Desperado, obtained after dying 3 times. After equipping, resurrection cost reduced by 20%, equipment. Black Star Pistol, normal, Taser, normal, Dagger, normal, tools, Hooligan Velcro, Hooligan Analysis Mirror Skills, Furamaki Style Martial Arts Total Assets, 6,446,000 yuan. The other attributes were nothing special, but in the panel, there was an additional category of skills. And in the category of skills, there were actually the words Furamaki Style Martial Arts. It can't be. Does this count as me learning a skill? This. After using his slightly excited finger to open Furamaki Style Martial Arts, a secondary page appeared in front of Ryuto's eyes. Furamaki Style Martial Arts, Skill Column, Profoundness of Skills, Tiger Fall, Proficiency 1%. Through the secondary page, Ryuto could not only see the types of skills that he had mastered, but the most important thing was that he could actually see the proficiency of the skills. It was really a pretty good support function. Although when he saw the 1% proficiency, Ryuto still curled his lips and felt a little annoyed. However, compared to this, what made him feel even more surprised was the new items in the Krypton gold market, the new items related to skills. Chapter 71. Long Do had always had a love-hate relationship with this Krypton shopping mall that didn't have a nice name but was very practical. He loves it because there are always a lot of very useful items in it, and he hates it because these things are too expensive. He can't afford many of them at all. He can only look at them and drool. However, at this moment, the Krypton shopping mall, which originally only had an item classification column, suddenly had a second classification. It actually had the words, skill classification, written on it. Skill classification, that is to say, he can buy things related to skills in it? Ryuto excitedly opened the skill classification column, and then he saw a lot of various skill books. Skill book. After purchasing, you can learn the skill. Repeated purchases can increase skill proficiency. After casually opening a skill book named Sao's Postpartum Care, Ryuto looked at the description below and suddenly nodded. What the hell is this skill? The description of the skill book was very simple and easy to understand. You can learn this skill after buying the first book, and continuing to buy the same type of skill book can quickly increase proficiency. It's just that the number and types of skill books in this skill classification column are really too many. At a glance, there was a dazzling array of skills, making one feel as if they had come to a museum of human skills. What are the ordinary skills? Ancient Bajikwan, Ancient Siamese Muay Thai, Ancient Ryukyu Tang Hand, Rapid Gun Shooting, Lock Picking, Silent Movement, etc. What were the arts and art skills? Rogues Don't Die by Bare Hands, Weapon Master, Essence of Forthright Throwing, Parkour Master, Iron Bone Mastery, Bronze Skin Mastery, etc. What were the stupid skills? Guide to Soap in Prison, Soul Singer's Roar, Lan's How Ramen Beef Thinly Sliced Method, One-Hit Kill Against Aliens, Golden Retriever's Hair Care, etc. What the hell? These skills were too creative. How in the world did they come up with them? After carefully reading the description of these skills, the dragon head really felt like he was watching a funny program. For example, the one-hit killing technique specifically for extraterrestrials was priced at $1 trillion. After learning it, one could kill any extraterrestrials that had descended to Earth with one hit. If this world were to be invaded by aliens in the future, Ryuto might be able to use this ability to save the world. The problem was that there were no aliens. After choosing for a while, Ryuto realized that there were some skills that were more realistic. Of course, their prices were also more realistic. For example, the Hooligan Does Not Die by Bare Hands, which was sold for 3 million yuan, was a super practical skill that could turn anything in one's hand into a fighting tool when one did not have a weapon. From small stones on the side of the road to large tables and chairs, pots and pans, everything that could be used as a weapon. After mastering it, it could be said that this was the pinnacle of environmental warfare. There was also mastery of iron bones, and mastery of copper skin. Although they were sold for 1 million each, they could greatly increase one's resistance. Other than these passive skills, the various active skills of the martial arts were also quite attractive. For example, Ancient Siamese Muay Thai. This fist technique was originally used to kill people on the battlefield. After slowly improving and reducing its lethality, it became the current fighting technique. In theory, the original version had long been lost. Similarly, there were Ancient Ryukyu Tang Hand, Ancient Bajikwan, and so on. Many of the martial arts here were the original forms that had long been lost. In terms of lethality, they were several levels stronger than the ones that were passed down. Because the Furamaki-style martial arts that he had just learned did not seem to have any active offensive moves, Ryuto also needed to choose a strong offensive martial art to supplement this. But at the same time, he also needed to buy some passive skills to strengthen his basic abilities. In short, there were many things that he wanted to buy, but he was so poor that he could not be at ease and buy boldly. Phew. In the end, he still needed to earn money. After taking the car back to the Rulon Group headquarters, Ryuto laid on the bed and looked at the ceiling. His heart was filled with all kinds of money symbols floating around. After the last revival, Ryuto's little treasury was only left with about 6 million. This amount of money was not too little, and could also be used to buy some good things from the market. But Ryuto did not dare to spend it carelessly. After all, his money was closely related to his life. If it was not for the fact that he had no other choice, he would not dare to spend the money to the limit. Otherwise, if he died, then wouldn't it be completely over? In short, tomorrow he should go to school first. He had to find Gao Yuan and pull him into his group to see if there was any way to earn a lot of money in a short period of time. Although Ryuto knew that most of the ways to earn money were written in the criminal law, he still hoped that Gao Yuan, the business genius, could help him. Right, it seemed that other than Gao Yuan who could help him in this area, there were also the two young ladies, right? At this moment, the figures of two beautiful women suddenly appeared in Ryuto's mind. Kanzaki-colored glaze and Tsukujiri Yunyen. These two young ladies had a certain level of friendship with Ryuto, and they were both of noble status. Why not ask them about earning money? If this was 2 days ago, Ryuto would have said something like, "A real man does not live off a woman," to put on an act. But now that he had unknowingly fallen into the abyss of spending money, his skin seemed to have become much thicker, and he no longer cared about living off a woman. Beep 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 beep. And so, 1 minute later, Kanzaki-colored glaze, who was sitting at her desk and writing calligraphy, received this message. "Young lady, I urgently need money right now. Do you have any way to help me? Dog's head. B.Y. Ryuto Kiryopft." What the hell was a dog's head? For a moment, colored glaze couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. The figure of the guy who had skipped class for the entire day appeared in her mind. If it weren't for the fact that she saw the dog's head at the end, colored glaze would have thought that he had gotten himself into some serious trouble. But now it seemed that it wasn't so serious. He was just being a talker. And so, colored glaze put down her writing brush, and her slender fingers swiftly flew over her cell phone's keyboard. Beep 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 beep. About 10 seconds later, colored glaze's reply came. "Go rob a bank. When the time comes, I'll write an anonymous letter to the nesting duck prison, to encourage you and cheer for you from the shadows." What the hell? It's one thing to write a letter to me, but it's an anonymous letter? Even if you want to cheer for me, you should do it somewhere I can see you. Isn't this too much? Just as Ryuto was sighing at how heartless colored glaze was, Yunyen's reply came. Chapter 72. Compared to colored glaze, who was born in a corrupt bureaucratic family and had seen through the darkness of the world, Yunyen's attitude was much better. "My parents don't want me to be tainted with bad habits, so they've always been strict with money. I really can't help you in this area. I'm very sorry." Well said, that's what a person should say. Through this simple sentence, Ryuto seemed to see Yunyen's apologetic expression on the other side of the phone. As expected of Yunyen from Suki Suki. She's beautiful, speaks well, and her attitude is so gentle. She's much better than a certain dark lady, humph. After secretly mocking colored glaze, Ryuto felt that it wasn't enough, so he continued to send messages to mock her. "You're a lady, and you're a lady. You're such a failure as a lady." What do you mean? Is he comparing me to someone? He knows other ladies? Humph. Colored glaze slightly pouted when she received this message, and her face showed obvious displeasure. So she continued to type mercilessly, trying to fight back across dimensions. But perhaps because colored glaze was too focused on texting, she didn't notice a familiar figure slowly approaching from behind. "Lady? Who are you texting?" "Wah." After being shocked by the dancing costume that suddenly appeared behind her, colored glaze's finger slipped and accidentally typed a word, then she hurriedly sent it out. Originally, Lioli was going to reply, "Then go and find the young mistress you like. Don't ask me." But the last few words changed from, "Don't ask me," to, "Don't kiss me." When Ryuto saw colored glaze's reply, he was dumbfounded. "Then go find the lady you like, don't kiss me." This means that if I don't find another lady, I can kiss her? Is colored glaze this open-minded? No, I'm a gentleman. How can I be like this when we've only known each other for a few days? We have to start from holding hands, kiss after 3 days, and do it after 6 days. After taking a deep breath, Ryuto decided to clearly express his honest attitude to colored glaze, so that she wouldn't misunderstand that he was an indecent person who could offer his body at any time. Colored glaze, on the other hand, didn't realize that there was a problem with the message she sent out, and was still arguing with Dancing Costume. Dancing Costume, just a greeting from a friend, nothing special. For some strange reason, colored glaze obviously didn't want Dancing Costume to know that she was communicating with Ryuto, so she put her phone behind her and made up a reasonable excuse. "Friend. Do any of your friends know your phone number? Dancing Costume immediately frowned. She knew that there were no more than 5 people who had the lady's phone number, and she knew all of them. After all, the lady's personal information was strictly controlled. It was impossible for ordinary people to know Colored Glaze's phone number, and Ryuto's phone number was secretly given to him by Colored Glaze. Suddenly, a drop of cold sweat fell from Colored Glaze's smooth forehead, and she quickly remedied, "It's a relative from the royal family. The girl you saw last time when you went back to your hometown, do you still remember? The eldest daughter of the emperor? Princess Feudaheim? Yes, that's her. But when you came back, didn't you say that the princess was unruly and uneducated, and her appearance and temperament were as bad as if she drank something strange when she grew up, so you didn't want to pay attention to her?" Pfft. After hearing Dancing Costume's merciless retelling, Colored Glaze almost spat out on the spot. On the surface, Dancing Costume was a samurai who protected and monitored Colored Glaze, but in reality, the two grew up together and were as close as sisters. So before Ryuto appeared, Colored Glaze would complain to Dancing Costume whenever she wanted to, and because she complained so much, she often forgot who she was complaining about. For a moment, Colored Glaze's expression became very awkward, and her little butt on the chair also twisted and turned, not knowing if there was something strange under her butt. Suspicious. From Dancing Costume's point of view, Colored Glaze's flustered expression and shifty eyes were very suspicious, as if she was doing something shameful. "Who are you talking to? Be honest and tell me, okay? I already said no. I was just... beep 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 beep." Just as Colored Glaze was insisting that she was definitely not doing anything shameful, a new text message was sent to her phone. Again. Colored Glaze turned her head and secretly glanced at her phone, then saw that the sender was Ryuto Kiryu again. Dancing Dress hurriedly looked over and leaned over to ask, "You're here again. Seeing how secretive you are, could you be a man?" "How could it be? If it's a man, he'll be thrown into the Tokyo Bay tomorrow to feed the fish." After swearing an oath on Ryuto's cheap life of a million, Colored Glaze blocked Dancing Costume with one hand to prevent her from getting any closer, while her other hand opened the text message to see what this guy was up to. But because the situation was more or less rushed, Colored Glaze did not see the voice symbol next to the text message. That's right, the voice symbol was a voice message, the kind that would automatically read out loud once opened. Thus, the second after Colored Glaze opened the text message, Ryuto's righteous tone appeared in the room. "Milady, I think that our relationship should be developed step by step, so kissing is a bit too much. But if you really want it that badly, it's not impossible to give it to you tomorrow." Ryuto's voice floated in Milady's room, and clearly entered Colored Glaze's and Dancing Costume's ears. In an instant, the room fell into a deathly silence. Colored Glaze stared at her phone with wide eyes, while Dancing Costume stared at Colored Glaze with wide eyes, as if she had seen something unbelievably terrifying. Did I hear wrong? Why would that idiot Ryuto suddenly say something stupid like, complete, kiss, want? The moment she reacted, Colored Glaze's pretty face turned red, but she quickly checked the text message on her phone. It would have been better if she didn't see it, but after reading it, Colored Glaze saw the "Don't Kiss Me" message she sent to Ryuto before. So that's why, did I type it wrong and accidentally send it out, causing that guy to misunderstand? After understanding the root of everything, Colored Glaze first let out a sigh of relief, then couldn't help but shiver. Because even without turning around, she could feel Dancing Costume's frantic breath behind her. "Milady, that was Ryuto Kiryu's voice just now, right? What did you do? How far has it developed?" No. There's really nothing. I swear. He must have lied to Milady. Damn it. I'll bring people to tear him to pieces. Wait. Don't. That night, Colored Glaze's room was filled with chicken feathers and duck blood, giving her a splitting headache. By the time she finally explained everything to Dancing Costume, it was already late at night. This caused Colored Glaze to come to school the next day with dark circles under her eyes. It was so infuriating. Chapter 73. When Miss Kanzaki colored glaze came to school early in the morning with dark circles under her eyes and an unhappy expression, it was destined that this would not be an ordinary day. A storm that could engulf all of Tokyo, was brewing. And the cause of this storm was the young master, Ryuto Kiryo, who had been waiting at the entrance of Dori Daiichi High School early in the morning. Most of the classes at Dori Daiichi High School were arranged in the morning, and because there were club activities in the afternoon, the students' time was also very scattered. So usually, the time of school in the morning was the time of the day when there was the most traffic. But early in the morning, a strange scene appeared at the school's entrance. The young master Ryuto, who had skipped class yesterday, was actually leaning against the entrance of Dori Daiichi High School, under the astonished gazes of countless people. From time to time, he would look around as if he was waiting for someone. Waiting for someone? It can't be, right? Could it be that he was waiting at the entrance to take someone's life? If it was a normal student, waiting for a friend at the school's entrance was actually quite normal, but if it was Ryuto who was waiting for someone, then it was easy for people to think of some scenes that were not suitable for children. So early in the morning, just who was Ryuto waiting for? Of course, it was colored glaze Kanzaki, who had her heart broken by him last night. Who else could it be? Ever since Ryuto sent that voice message last night, he had been waiting for a long time, but he did not receive a reply from colored glaze. Wait a minute. Did I speak too directly and hurt her heart? At this time, Ryuto finally started to panic, so he kept texting and calling colored glaze, but there was no response. With no other choice, Ryuto could only go to the school's entrance early in the morning to wait for Kanzaki, and try to explain to her that he had just spoken without thinking and had no other intentions. Ah, she's coming. Not long after, when he saw two beautiful figures walking towards him from the crowd, Ryuto immediately became alert and tried his best to keep a low profile as he walked towards them. Early in the morning, when colored glaze stepped out of her low-profile black car, all the students around her could feel an unprecedented low pressure. Normally, although colored glaze Kanzaki was not as approachable as Yunyen Suki, she would not come to school with a sour expression. But today's colored glaze Kanzaki was obviously not in a good mood, and the dark circles under her eyes were very obvious. When she slowly walked towards the school's entrance, Kanzaki's dancing, who got out of the car with her, and said, Kanzaki, why don't you consider putting some makeup on? I never put on makeup. It's not like you don't know that. Who do you think gave it to? It's all thanks to you, okay? Colored glaze Kanzaki pointed at the large dark circles under her left eye and curled her lips at Kanzaki's dancing costume. If it wasn't for Kanzaki's dancing costume going crazy and wanting to kill someone last night, and colored glaze using all sorts of methods to explain herself, she wouldn't have gone to bed so late last night. However, when colored glaze and dancing costume arrived at the entrance where there was the most traffic, her dim eyes suddenly caught sight of a low-profile figure walking towards them. That guy had his head down and his waist bent like a cat, as if he didn't want to attract attention. But unfortunately, the surrounding students who were running away as if they had seen a ghost had already exposed the identity of this Voldemort. Isn't that guy Ryuto? When she saw Long Zhou walking towards her, colored glaze first snorted coldly, then as if she had thought of something, her cheeks slightly flushed. Although last night's misunderstanding was caused by her hand slipping. But when she carefully thought about it, colored glaze couldn't help but roll around on the bed. The butterflies in her stomach were running wild. After all, words like kiss, complete, and want were too stimulating for colored glaze. Since she was raised as a vegetarian king from a young age, her understanding of the relationship between men and women was strictly controlled by her family. But from the descriptions in some books, colored glaze could imagine how hot it would feel if intimate contact between men and women happened between her and the person she liked. Of course, even so, it didn't mean that colored glaze was willing to do those things with Ryuto. Especially after hearing Ryuto's reply last night, colored glaze was still a bit angry. What, in the voice chat, he made it sound like I was a horny slut. That's too much. Therefore, when she saw Ryuto walk towards her, as if he had something to say to her, colored glaze's first reaction was to act haughty and leave. She would wait for Ryuto to catch up and then listen to him slowly apologize. I'm still angry. If you don't apologize to me for 5 minutes, I won't talk to you. As if she was deliberately throwing a tantrum, Colored Glaze quickly pulled the dancing costume in another direction, as if she wanted to purposely go around Ryuto. Although this action was tens of meters away, Ryuto obviously noticed it. Wait. Don't. Hence, he immediately raised his hand and tried to stop Luli from running. At the very least, it wouldn't be too late for her to run after listening to his explanation. But just as Ryuto was about to approach and Colored Glaze was about to pretend to run away, another tall and curvy figure came over and inserted herself between the two. Oh, isn't this Ryuto, classmate? Good morning. It was different from Colored Glaze's crisp voice that carried a trace of majesty and valiance, as if it was a unique voice that made people feel like they were in a forest. Suddenly, the voice that came from Ryuto's side sounded much softer, more mellow and smooth, and it also brought out the beauty of a woman's voice to the extreme. Ryuto heard this voice the day before yesterday, and it just so happened that the owner of this voice was one of the few girls in school who would take the initiative to greet him. So he turned his head to look, and saw Yunyen's beautiful figure slowly walking towards him, with a smile as bright as the morning sun on her face. Yunyen, good morning. After seeing Yunyen, Ryuto immediately stopped and waved at the beautiful senior with a smile. Most people in school thought that Ryuto was a mad dog, so they didn't even dare to approach him. But after the incident the day before yesterday, Yunyen knew that he wasn't that kind of person, but a promising young man with noble morals. Why did she say that? Because he was willing to help Yunyen with her writing, so he must be a promising young man. When she came to Ryuto's side, Yunyen asked in a concerned tone, "Oh right, you didn't come to school yesterday, did something special happen?" Something did happen, but let's talk about it as we walk. Just after Yunyen came over, Ryuto could feel at least a few hundred eyes looking at them, which made him feel a bit awkward. So, early in the morning, Yunyen and Ryuto Kiryu walked side by side in the direction of the school gate under the watchful eyes of everyone. When the surrounding crowd saw this scene, they suddenly became excited. Colored Glaze, who originally wanted to throw a tantrum and act high and mighty, and wait for Ryuto to apologize, had her brain freeze on the spot. Chapter 74. Why did this guy Ryuto hook up with Yunyen so quickly, and from the looks of it, they seem to be very familiar with each other. Just 2 days ago, Colored Glaze did indeed hear that Ryuto was going to contact Yunyen, but she didn't think that he would act so quickly, and that their relationship would develop so quickly. Originally, with the severity of Colored Glaze's situation, it would be very difficult for Ryuto to hook up with Miss Tsukiji. After all, not every miss had the heart of a bodhisattva and magnanimous like her, to be able to tolerate that idiot steel-like straight man's mental state. But what people didn't expect was, this early in the morning, what the hell did Colored Glaze see? Under Lu Li's gaze that was as if she had seen a ghost, Long Do and Yunyen walked into the campus side by side. Moreover, the two of them were talking and laughing, looking very happy. At this moment, Colored Glaze, who was just throwing a tantrum at Ryuto, felt very embarrassed. It was as if the person she was throwing a tantrum at had suddenly appeared out of nowhere and was snatched away halfway. Miss. Wait, my head hurts, let me rest. Just as Colored Glaze was holding her forehead and closing her eyes to rest, this strange storm quickly blew from outside the school gate to inside the school gate. If the situation of Ryuto waiting at the gate was enough to attract attention, then him and Yunyen walking into the school side by side, and even talking and laughing, this scene could only be described as a fatty and little boy holding hands again. It was well known that although Yunyen was a very easy person to get along with, she had always maintained a polite distance with boys. The proof was that until now, no one had ever seen Yunyen alone with a boy. Moreover, this kind of situation where the two of them were talking and laughing at the same time going to school early in the morning was actually a somewhat immature and romantic act. Even if they weren't a couple, it would only happen between a boy and a girl who had feelings for each other. Could it be? It can't be. Yunyen and Ryuto Kiryu? This was simply super big news. Of course, the current relationship between Yunyen and Ryuto wasn't that kind of relationship. At most they were the relationship between a lousy author and an unlucky editor. But the feeling of them talking and laughing along the way really made it easy for people to think the wrong way. The worst thing was that it wasn't one or two people who thought the wrong way, but the whole school together. Not long after, as usual, this morning's classes started as usual. But whether it was in the first, second grade, or third grade classes, a new pace, a storm was still rapidly brewing quickly. Many years ago, the computer brain of Dory First Senior High School had set up a forum called First Senior High BBS to share some interesting things and gossip in the school. Most of the time, most of the students didn't have a habit, so most students didn't have a habit with a habit. However, there was a huge change in the situation today. Any student, as long as they quietly opened the First High BBS with their mobile phone under the cover of a book, they would definitely see the crazy posts like a virus. Because of the big event that happened this morning, most of the posts naturally revolved around the two central figures. One of them was the third-year school belle who was loved by everyone. She was the cloud goose in the moonlight. The other was the second-year school bully, Tong Shang Ryudu, who was feared by everyone and was the reincarnated ghost of a ghost. If someone said that these two names would be together before today, that person would definitely think that there was something wrong with their brain. But now it was different. The situation had changed rapidly. It was like the Earth was invaded by aliens. Even on the First High BBS, the most popular voting post was, "What do you think the relationship between Yun Yan and that person is?" After morning, the voting results of this post were as follows. The votes for absolutely no relationship were 726 votes. The votes for anyway, let's call the police first, were 921 votes. The votes for Ryuto Kiryu should die were 869, 672, 6592, 271 votes. How to describe it? Who knew where this school got so many people? It was simply a universal public outrage. The wave that this incident set off was something that even Ryuto and Yun Yan didn't expect. For the whole day, almost all the students from the first grade to the third grade didn't want to go to class. They constantly used all kinds of reasoning and discussion, beating around the bush, and making up nonsense to try to uncover the truth of the matter, while at the same time cursing someone to get hit by a truck and go to another world. This kind of noisy and restless atmosphere made Masato Takayama, who was sitting in the first-year F class, feel very unhappy. In this first high school that focused on the academic atmosphere, the students' academic performance had a very clear correlation with their class. Each grade was divided into 6 classes from A to F. The best students were concentrated in a class, and the worst students would naturally fall into F class. As for how Ryuto, that guy, got into B class, it was obviously because he worked very hard during the exam. He tried his best to threaten the unlucky guy next to him to help him finish the exam so that he wouldn't fall into F class, which was full of trash. From the point of view that even Ryuto didn't want to go to F class students were more or less discriminated against in school. As a result, they worked especially hard after entering F class, striving to get a chance to be promoted in the next exam. Of course, this so-called promotion desire had nothing to do with Masato Takayama. He felt that F class was pretty good, and it was quiet in this place. In the eyes of ordinary students, Masato Takayama was an unremarkable guy. He was thin, had a melancholy temperament, and his messy hair almost covered his eyes. He was usually alone, giving people a serious feeling of being unsociable. In most classes, there would be 1 or 2 such students, and not many people would pay attention to them. But Masato Takayama wasn't an ordinary student. In fact, his degree of excellence was far beyond what ordinary people could imagine. Ring, 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 ring. After a chaotic day, the bell that signified the end of school rang throughout the campus. Gao Yuan carried his school bag and walked out of the school with familiarity. For Masato Takayama, he had to deal with the business affairs of several companies, so he didn't have time to waste in school. But what he didn't expect was that when he left the school building, 2 strange people hiding in the dark had already locked onto this elite ghost figure, like a big cat that saw a mouse. Chapter 75. At this moment, the 2 people who were secretly watching Gao Yuan were naturally Long Do and Ming Ji. After looking at the face that he was tired of looking at for 2 days, Sensible couldn't help but sigh, Masato Gaoyuan. From the surface, he doesn't look like such a vicious guy. From the surface, you don't look like such a capable guy. Don't judge a book by its cover, brother. Unlike Sensible, when Ryuto looked at Gao Yuan, his gaze was like looking at a hen that could lay golden eggs. In fact, Masato Gao Yuan was indeed a hen that could lay golden eggs, but from a certain point of view, this hen laid poisonous eggs. In these 2 days, Ryuto asked Sensible to investigate Gao Yuan and obtained a lot of information about him. Although Ryuto already knew what Gao Yuan was doing in the dark through the content of the game didn't explain in detail, so he still needed some details. And Sensible lived up to the name, Cyber Detective. After Ryuto gave him the direction to investigate, he quickly investigated Gao Yuan. Masato Takahara, 15 years old, male. His father was the executive director of the large gaming company, Nintendo. He was the 3rd child in the family. His 2 brothers' grades were excellent, and they both worked in the family company. Masato Gao Yuan, who grew up in this situation, wasn't very valued and didn't get along well with others. Whether it was in his family or in school, there weren't many people who would pay attention to him. Therefore, 3 years ago, Gao Yuan began to try to make a name for himself. And the direction he was trying to make a name for himself was to develop into a business consultant, and he shocked everyone with his skills. When he was 12 years old, Gao Yuan used his unique business sense and unscrupulous business model to help a company come back from the dead. From then on, he gained the name Business Ghost. Now, he was a secret business consultant for 5 listed companies, the kind that only served the top managers. Although he had never shown his face, those operators were very convinced because as long as they followed Gao Yuan's train of thought, they would be able to make a lot of money. However, although Gao Yuan was able to make the company's business situation quite good, as Sensible said, this guy's business methods could only be described as vicious. As the saying goes, the business world is like a battlefield, but this is just a metaphor. Many businessmen in the Tokyo circle still want some face, and they won't do things so ruthlessly. However, in Gao Yuan's hands, it was as literal as it could be. He treated the business war as a battlefield. He would do anything for the sake of victory. Examples for comparison are as follows. The traditional business strategy of Tokyo's business circle. By dissecting the weaknesses of human nature and specializing in the loopholes of the law, it could be used thousands of miles away to convert value into resources. Using all kinds of black technology, spies, hackers, and other auxiliary plans to achieve results-oriented structural enterprises to pave the way. Gao Yuan's subordinate, Shang Zhan, arranging for takeout staff to put laxatives in competitors' water fountains, ordering a few burly men to rush into the office to snatch the official seal, bribing security guards to climb over the wall into competitors' factory to secretly take photos, and hiring hooligans to walk around their company every day. Arranging for actors to cooperate with the TV station to fake the other party's door and add a hell filter. Buying a water army to smear the other party to death, or simply putting a burlap bag over the head of the other party's senior management to beat them up at night. In summary, Gao Yuan's business war was a real business war. It was not the kind of high-end business war that people imagined. If you can use the hammer directly, you won't use your brain. If you use your brain, you don't have to be afraid of being locked up. In any case, as long as you can suppress the opponent and make money for yourself, you bastard. Under this kind of business model that could be said to be extremely unethical, the boss of Gao Yuan's company was always one step away from going to jail. His butt would always be greased and waiting for the favor of the prisoner. But he himself didn't care about this. In any case, it was the boss who went to jail, not him. At worst, he could just change companies and continue. Was the boss's fortune telling? Once he earned this money, he would be ready to pick up soap at any time. Did he really think that money was so easy to earn? Of course, Gao Yuan didn't purely rely on all kinds of despicable methods to win the world. He was actually very good at all kinds of normal business methods that wandered the edge of the law. It was just that he preferred to use simple and convenient tactics. In fact, just the day before, Gao Yuan instructed one of his companies to hire another company called BlackBerry Conscience Finance to collect a debt by force. This Conscience Finance appeared to be an ordinary financial company on the surface, but in fact, it was a debt collection group formed by violent groups. This kind of debt collection group was on the border between legal and illegal. They would use some very uncomfortable methods to collect debts, but it was useless to call the police. Of course, in addition to collecting debts, they also did some other financial work, such as phone calls, online fraud, and counterfeiting. In this era, this kind of financial company that was on the border between legal and illegal was very common. It was also a half-legal industry that changed from extreme to semi-legal. Of course, to put it bluntly, it was a group of trash that relied on bullying honest people to make money. However, what could be used should be used. Even if it was trash, it could be used to great effect in Gao Yuan's hands. The most important thing was that he always hid behind the phone. No matter what he ordered the company to do, no one could find him. Takahara Masato, the person who hired Conscience Finance to collect debts, was you, right? Just as Gao Yuan left the school gate and came to a more remote corner, a powerful hand wrapped around him like a ghost. Huh? In an instant, Gao Yuan was completely stunned. How is this possible? Someone knows that I was the one who arranged yesterday's incident? In the next second, Gao Yuan turned his head stiffly. When he saw the ferocious face with dyed yellow hair, his body suddenly trembled violently. It was Ryuto Kiryu, the famous second generation in Dori First High. Gao Yuan naturally had a certain understanding of Ryuto and the Rulong group. But the most important thing was that Long Do had actually exposed his biggest secret in an instant. This made Gao Yuan feel a chill in his heart. He immediately took a deep breath and said with a bitter smile, I don't know what you're talking about. Yesterday, the company that you sent people to violently collect debts from is under the protection of the Dragon Group. In other words, the person that you and your company offended is me. Do you understand what will happen to you, friend? When he put his arm around Gao Yuan's shoulder like a close friend, Ryuto showed a gentle smile on his face. But in Gao Yuan's eyes, this smile was more terrifying than the devil from the 18 levels of hell. Chapter 76. No, it can't be. The company that I sent people to violently collect debts is under the protection of the Rulong Group? Why don't I know this information at all? Wait, the most important thing is, how did they know my identity? How did I get exposed? Suddenly, Gao Yuan's legs couldn't help but tremble. He knew that the underground world was very particular about face. If his organization was messed with by other organizations, then he must do something to save his face. The worst thing was that Gao Yuan's true identity was known by the extreme elements. Wouldn't that be the end of him? From Gao Yuan's point of view, he absolutely couldn't allow his identity to be made public. After all, his parents and brothers were senior executives of legal listed companies, the famous Ninetio managers. If the public knew that Gao Yuan's family had such an unscrupulous business ghost who often crossed the legal line, it would definitely cause a serious blow to his family. In the area of Yoto, people cared more about their face than their family background. Their heads could be broken, blood could flow, but their hairstyle couldn't be messed up. If this kind of scandal were to be exposed, Gao Yuan's family would lose all face. A collective bow and an apology would not be enough. At the very least, they would have to add traditional etiquette such as a tearful performance and kowtow and kneel. At that time, Gao Yuan, who had embarrassed his family, would be expelled from the family and homeless on the streets. Even if Rulong Group continued to retaliate against him, it would not be impossible for him to die on the streets. Thinking of that scene, Gao Yuan's face was covered in a few drops of cold sweat. At the same time, he said with a trembling voice, "How much? How much do you want?" After being a business consultant for so many years, Gao Yuan naturally had a lot of money in his hands. If he could use money to bribe Ryuto, then this matter could be considered to be resolved satisfactorily. However, Ryuto shook his head and replied with a smile, "Although money is a good thing, I don't think this alone is enough to show your sincerity." Sincerity? Don't tell me. He wants me to. In an instant, Gao Yuan couldn't help but think of the extremely terrifying punishments he had seen in manga. As he thought about it, his legs turned to jelly. He almost lost control of his bladder and was about to pee. No matter what, Gao Yuan was only a 15-year-old boy. Although he was a big shot in the business world, he was just a coward. In fact, according to the feedback from Ryuto's rogue analysis mirror, this guy's courage was only at the level of LVL1 mortal scraps. This was also the reason why he only dared to do business remotely through the phone, because he didn't dare to stand in the open. It was about time for him to atone for his sins with merit. Seeing that Gao Yuan looked like he was about to piss his pants, Ryuto's lips curled into a strange smile. He smiled and said, "Gao Yuan Masato, your business acumen and style of doing things are very good. Are you interested in working for me?" What? Follow him? When he heard this sudden invitation, Gao Yuan was startled at first, but then he heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he thought he was going to be thrown into the Tokyo Bay to feed the fish. So he just wanted to poach him? Gao Yuan had a deep understanding of his own ability and value. He naturally knew what Ryuto's poaching meant. In this materialistic world, even the Rulon Group needed money. And Takahara Masato was the person who could bring monetary returns to all organizations. Therefore, under Ryuto's deceit and intimidation, Gao Yuan soon appeared in the corner of a coffee shop. In the half-private room in the corner of the coffee shop, there were 3 young people sitting at this time. 3 young people wearing Dori First High School uniforms. First year Takahara Masato, second year Ryuto Kiryo, third year Sensible Goro. On the surface, this scene looked like 3 ordinary friends sitting together and chatting, but in fact, the identity of these 3 people was far from ordinary. Their father was a senior executive of a listed company, and he controlled 5 large enterprises. He had a keen business sense and a habit of doing business by any means necessary. Their father was the Tokyo police chief, and he secretly acted as a network detective. He had superhuman insight and a full understanding of the law, cyber detective. Their father was the leader of a large group. On the surface, he was playing a love game, but in fact, he was playing an action-adventure game to raise the extreme dragon. From a certain point of view, the family background and experience of the 3 were somewhat similar. They all had a prominent family background, but they wanted to make their own business. The most important thing was that they were the kind of people who didn't hesitate to cross the boundary of the law and wander in the dark. Therefore, Ryuto gave his group a name, Black 3 Stars. In the corner of the coffee shop, Ryuto also drank milk while telling Gao Yuan some things about the Heavenly Eye Group. At the same time, he clearly told him that he wanted to use his power to start a war with this group. I see. Heavenly Eye Group, so there is such a terrifying company in the world. Regarding the Heavenly Eye Group and Heavenly I Am, even a business veteran like Gao Yuan had a hard time finding out. At this time, he couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. Therefore, Ryuto struck while the iron was hot and asked, "So, have you decided to do it with us? You didn't plan to let me go anyway. What's the point of asking such a question? Ha ha ha, it's not a question of whether I plan to let you go or not. It's just that it's too wasteful for a talent like you to just control a few small enterprises behind the scenes." Long Do giggled as he tried to play dumb. At the same time, he discreetly gave Gao Yuan a compliment. In fact, Gao Yuan didn't have a choice now. After all, his background had been dug out. What else could he do if he didn't join? Wait to wander the streets. What's more, Gao Yuan was indeed very interested in the Heavenly Eye Group, just like Sensible before. After all, no matter what, Gao Yuan and Sensible were only teenagers. The atmosphere of fighting against an evil company that is harming the world behind the scenes was quite attractive. And under Ryuto's banner, they could unscrupulously display their strengths. This was indeed a very tempting combination. Let's talk about something serious. After confirming the addition of this new partner, Sensible, who was sitting across from him and eating cream cake, asked, "Now the Rulon Group needs money and needs a business that can continue to make money. What do you think about this?" In terms of law, Sensible could be said to be an expert, but in terms of business, he wasn't. If there was a need to solve some legal issues, he could provide help. When it came to making money, it wasn't Sensible's specialty. Well, if the Rulon Group needs to develop a business that can continue to make money, then the first thing to do is to find a relatively clean shell. After all, the Rulon Group name can't be used. At this point, Gao Yuan picked up a chocolate bar from the table, put it in his mouth, and crunched it into pieces. Chapter 77. In Gao Yuan's opinion, the extreme Dao of this era was very sad. Since the release of the Violent Group Countermeasure Law, groups that were blacklisted as designated violent groups were strictly monitored by the government and society, and it was difficult for them to engage in any open industry. Therefore, the designated violent groups could either turn over a new leaf, or slowly disappear on their own in a half-dead state. Or they could simply go all the way and engage in the darkest industries such as guns, anesthetics, and organ trafficking until they rotted in the gutter. At this time, the Rulon Group was in the second situation, in a visible half-dead state. Because of the double restrictions of the Violent Group Countermeasure Law and the chivalrous spirit. While the Rulon Group was declining, they were unwilling to engage in the darker industries. In the long run, naturally, they could not make ends meet, and it was particularly awkward. In this situation, it was obviously quite difficult for the Rulon Group to make money, but it was not completely impossible. The designated violent group has too many restrictions and is not conducive to action, so first, we have to find some shell companies or companies that appear to be decent, and then let the members of the Rulon Group leave the group to join. This way, we can break up the whole group into parts, and at the same time, engage in some legal profiteering industries. That makes sense. Then what industry would be better? Well, if it's suitable for your line of work, can make money faster, and can be called a profiteering industry, first of all, a security company can be considered. Security company? Something like bodyguards? Personal bodyguard business is also included, but the security company itself has a wide range of services, from permanent staff to temporary guards, escorting cash, valuables, and so on. If you can get in touch with the business and political circles, then it's a business with limitless potential. According to Gao Yuan's knowledge, the annual profits of several large and medium-sized security companies in Tokyo were quite considerable, and the services they provided were not special. To put it bluntly, whose money was the security company earning? It was the rich people's money. For example, providing security services for the rich when they go out, it was common for them to make a net profit of millions of yen. If he could cooperate with insurance companies and provide security services for companies or individuals who bought large amounts of insurance, or even get in touch with public authorities, it would be even faster than money laundering. However, to engage in this kind of business, one needed an extremely wide range of contacts and trustworthiness, as well as a large number of capable elite subordinates. This was not a business that ordinary people could do. A security company. That's doable. This is a very suitable way for me to earn money. Compared to Gao Yuan, Ryuto naturally knew more about his own situation. First and foremost, he was the young master of the Rulon Group, and he had his own special intelligence network and a group of capable subordinates. Secondly, with the help of Masato Takashi, who had eyes and ears in the business world, he could quickly open up cooperation channels in the business world and ensure that customers would come quickly. After that, there was Sensible, a detective hacker who could invade the police department system. He could immediately understand all the movements of the Tokyo Regional Police Department. At the same time, he was proficient in the law and could find many legal loopholes. After that, Ryuto also had a relationship with the young lady of the Tsukujiri Consortium, and he could buy a lot of high-tech weapons and equipment that were not circulated on the market. After that, the Kaneshiro clan could almost be said to control half of Nippon's political world. If Colored Glaze was willing to help, he could quickly establish a relationship with the government and ensure that the security company could set sail smoothly. This was great. The source of money and the huge network of connections were combined together. Ryuto could even hear the beautiful sound of money flowing quickly. At this moment, Sensible on the side asked in confusion, but even if the Rulon Group established a security company, it will still take some time to compete with the other established companies in Tokyo. It doesn't matter, as long as they lose their reputation. My reputation is ruined. I'm familiar with those security companies. Their crisis management and public relations capabilities are very poor. They are completely useless people lying in their comfort zone. So if they were attacked by unknown people in the recent mission, causing the mission to fail, and then the failure of the mission quickly spread to the streets and the internet, then their credibility will definitely plummet. Humph. Wow, so vicious, worthy of being a business ghost. Although Gao Yuan didn't say it explicitly, his meaning was very obvious. That was, if the Rulong Group established a security company, there was no need for other security companies in the Tokyo area. No matter what industry, no matter what era, the business of monopolizing was the most profitable. Coupled with the fact that Tokyo was full of rich people, as long as the oil was squeezed out of the rich people, the profits that could be brought by this oil was simply immeasurable. So Ryuto said decisively, "It's decided, let's do it. We'll leave immediately." Leave immediately? Where are we going? After hearing the boss's words, Sensible and Gao Yuan also stood up, but they didn't know where the boss wanted to go. To our new company, Rulong Security Company, the temporary office. Since it was a new company, even if it didn't have an office building, it should at least have a decent office. As for the location of the office, Ryuto actually thought about it a long time ago because there was a ready-made office in front of him. However, the ready-made office still had the bright words, BlackBerry Finance, hanging on the door at this time. As long as someone passed by here, they would be puzzled by such a strange finance company. But if they were brave enough to walk in, what they saw would inevitably make them feel more puzzled. On the surface, this was just an ordinary office, with tables, chairs, stools, phones, computers, and other daily work appliances. However, the curtains that had never been opened and the thick soundproof door formed an isolated island here, an isolated island that was completely isolated from the outside world. The employees who worked on the island all wore ferocious looks and were dressed in sloppy and hooligan clothes. They used beautiful words to greet customers through the phone. Remember, trash, you must return the money by tomorrow. Don't even think about running, or I'll burn your whole family. Hey Mom, I caused some trouble outside and need some money, hurry up and transfer the money to this account. What? You don't have a son? F*CKU, hurry up and transfer the money. That batch of $100 bills? I'm dealing with it, don't worry. How can so many $100 bills be cleaned up so quickly? Can you get some $1,000 bills next time? When Ryuto, Sensible, and Gao Yuan stood at the entrance of the BlackBerry Finance, they seemed to be able to hear the friendly roar from inside through the thick soundproof door. Chapter 78. Is it just the three of us? Don't we need to find more people? When Gao Yuan came to the door of Conscience Finance, he couldn't help but gulp. He was timid to begin with. Not to mention, Ryuto didn't bring them here just to chat. From Gao Yuan's understanding of the Conscience Finance, the people inside were former members of the violent gang. After leaving the violent gang, they opened a finance company that specialized in loan sharks, debt collectors, money laundering, fraud, and other work. Although they were former members of the violent gang, they were undoubtedly a group of underground society members. They were a group of murderers that did whatever they wanted. But Ryuto said he wanted this office? He wanted to use this as the starting place for the Rulong Security Company? Did he plan to buy it with money? If that's the case, he would be ripped off. Knock knock knock. Just as Gao Yuan was thinking about this, Ryuto took the lead and knocked on the door with the simple Conscience Finance sign. Huh. Instantly, Gao Yuan couldn't help but take a step back. "TSK, don't be such a coward." Mingji, who was beside him, chuckled after seeing his actions. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, our boss is the young master of the Rulong Group. He can call thousands of people with one phone call." That's true. Ha ha ha, don't be so nervous. Long Do also smiled brightly and said, "Actually, these underground financiers aren't that unreasonable. You just have to smile and deal with them, and you'll be fine." "Is that so?" I see. Boss, you're right. I almost believed you. After hearing Ryuto's explanation, Gao Yuan forced a smile on his face, but the panic in his eyes didn't decrease at all. Bang! In the next moment, as the door was violently opened, a bald man wearing an old suit with a scar on his forehead walked out. Ah! Kid, what are you doing here? This isn't a place to play video games. When he saw 3 high school students standing outside the door, the bald scarred man's face showed an impatient expression. Ryuto smiled and said, "We are here for business. Anyway, let's go in first. It's not convenient to talk outside." Serious business? I say, are you guys looking down on Extreme Dao, you bastards? Suddenly, the bald scarred man frowned. He quickly raised his hands and clasped them together, preparing to make crackling sounds to intimidate the other party. Unfortunately, Long Do's movements were much faster than his. Just as this guy raised his hand, a hard fist landed on his chin without hesitation. Under Sensible and Gao Yuan's dumbfounded gaze, Ryuto's punch sent the scarred bald man stumbling back through the door. After stumbling a few meters, he clutched his chin and fell to the ground. Which Extreme Dao would specifically give a warning before beating someone up? Is this guy an idiot? But it also confirmed my conjecture. This group of gangsters who engage in conscience finance is just a group of amateurs. With this level of skill, they want to learn how to collect debts? After casually knocking down the first person he met to the ground, Long Do swaggered in, not recognizing even his own family. Looking at his posture, it was as if he didn't see anyone else in the room as a person. It was as if he was surrounded by a group of SpongeBob SquarePants. Other than the bald man who was knocked down, there were 3 other people in the room. One was a red-haired gangster who wore a flowery shirt and dyed red hair. He looked like he failed to cosplay as Iori Yagami, and instead, he cosplayed as Eunuch Yagami. Another one was a strong man who held a phone in one hand and a dumbbell in the other. His huge muscles were as thick as a white shirt. He was not someone to be trifled with. The last one was dressed in a nice suit. His hair was neatly combed. At first glance, he looked like a white-collar worker, but the cunning expression on his face and the murderous glint in his eyes could not be hidden. When Long Do knocked the bald man down with a single punch, the other 3 people in the room immediately stood up from their chairs and looked over in unison. "Hey, brat, what are you doing? Do you want to die?" Seeing that his companion was beaten up, the red-haired gangster immediately picked up a baseball bat from the side and rushed over. Although this gangster looked naive, the baseball bat in his hand was strong and vigorous. It seemed like he often used this thing to beat people up. However, Ryuto didn't dodge the bat that was swinging towards him. Instead, he directly extended his right hand to block it. Is this guy crazy? Using his arm to block the bat's attack? Does he think he's a little golden man with copper skin and iron bones? Crack. Just when everyone thought that Ryuto's arm would definitely be broken, a crisp sound came from the bat. What's going on? In the next second, the red-haired gangster looked at the broken baseball bat in his hand. His eyes were about to pop out. How is this possible? This is a composite baseball bat, with a hardness close to an aluminum bat. Is this guy's arm made of steel? If it was a big guy with thick arms and thighs could do this, the others wouldn't be so surprised. But Ryuto's small 16-year-old arm could actually break the baseball bat? Isn't this too exaggerated? Are you shocked? This is the power of Krypton Gold. When everyone was shocked by this magical scene, Ryuto proudly raised his head. At the same time, he showed a painful expression. In fact, before coming here, Ryuto secretly bought 2 new passive skills from the Krypton Gold store: Iron Bone Mastery and Copper Skin Mastery. These 2 skills cost a total of 2 million, which made Ryuto's wallet flatten a lot. But the use of this money was quite obvious. At this moment, these 2 skills were described in Ryuto's skill pane. Skill pane, Iron Bone Mastery, can greatly increase bone hardness, 20% proficiency. Skill pane, Copper Skin Mastery, can greatly increase skin hardness, 20% proficiency. With the existence of these two passive skills, Ryuto's physical strength naturally increased by a large margin. It was as if he practiced some kind of hard qigong. This skill combined with the LV3 physique, professional master, physical fitness. To put it in an exaggerated way, even if he stood there and let people hit him, they might not be able to defeat him. Although it was not to the extent of the legendary copper skin iron bone, invulnerable state, but his endurance was already quite shocking. Moreover, this was only under the condition that the proficiency of the two passive skills was only 20%. Chapter 79. Ryuto only had a preliminary understanding of skill proficiency. First of all, regardless of whether it was an active or passive skill, when first learned, the proficiency level was very low. For example, Furamaki-style martial arts was only at a pitiful 1%. As the proficiency level increased, its power and effect would naturally increase. But the process of increasing proficiency level was not easy. The first way to increase proficiency level was naturally to practice diligently. For example, continuously practicing Furamaki-style ultimate skill, Tiger Fall, would inevitably increase proficiency level. But this method of increasing proficiency level was very slow. After all, to truly master a martial art, it would take years as a unit of time. For Ryuto, who was at most 2 years away from the final battle, it was impossible to achieve his goal by just practicing diligently. Therefore, he could only place his hopes on the second method, which was the most practical and realistic method, which was to spend money. From the current situation, when buying a skill book, Ryuto could not only automatically learn the skill, but also obtain 20% proficiency level. In other words, as long as he continuously bought 5 identical skill books, he would be able to raise the skill to 100% proficiency level. At that time, he would truly be a master, majestic, invincible, and able to leap onto roofs and vault over walls. But skill books were not something that could be bought just because one wanted to. It was not even something that could be bought with money. After all, the items in the shop would only be refreshed after death, and it was also randomly refreshed. Therefore, in the worst-case scenario, Ryuto might need to continuously kill himself to crazily farm the shop in order to buy a skill book that he wanted. This was a bit too miserable. Of course, the investment in skills would also bring about huge returns. From this point of view, the benefits of skill books were extremely high in most cases. Especially when he saw the dumbstruck expression of the group of people in the office, Dragon Head felt even more awesome. "Your baseball bat is not good. Buy a harder one next time." After blocking the bat, Ryuto casually grabbed the broken baseball bat and without looking, smashed it at the red-haired delinquent's head. Bang! Accompanied by a muffled sound, the red-haired thug's hair turned even redder, as if he had enjoyed a free natural hair dye, and he fell to the ground and fainted. This brat was not an ordinary person. Seeing the tyrannical strength displayed by Ryuto, as well as the look of complete disregard on his face, the cunning-looking man in a suit could not help but grit his teeth. Therefore he asked in a cautious tone, "Who are you? What brings you here?" Ryuto chuckled when he heard this. He walked over to the table and sat down, propping his legs up high. Looking at that arrogant look, those who did not know would think that he was the boss of Conscience Finance. "What the hell are you? Speaking of which, did you scum ask for my permission to loan money here?" "What?" Ryuto's tone suddenly became very gloomy. His gaze towards the suited man also became incomparably cold. In an instant, the room seemed to be covered by a cold wind of ice and snow. It was as if they had come to the Siberian prairie, and there was a grass-mud horse spitting on their faces. Lending money. Asking for permission? Wait, could it be that this brat is someone from the underworld? Although it was hard to imagine that a young man wearing a high school uniform would be someone from the underworld, his aura made people feel that he was not joking at all. After a moment, the suited man swallowed his saliva and sneered, "We are lending money here with the permission of the Rulon Group. Although I don't know which gang you are from, you should at least give some face to the Rulon Group, right?" When they heard the suited man's words, Sensible and Gao Yuan, who were slowly walking in from the door, widened their eyes. The Rulong Group was the largest gang in Tokyo. The name of this organization was naturally very intimidating. However, the problem was that the Rulong Group had never been involved in these kinds of dirty financial crimes. Otherwise, they would not be so poor. Sensible and Gao Yuan were naturally clear about this situation. So, the suited man was putting on an act. Moreover, he was putting on an act in front of the young master of the Rulong Group. What was this? Flood the Dragon King Temple? Playing PR in front of Guanyu? Thus, Ryuto smiled and waved his hand. He smiled and said, "Phone. Phone. Immediately call your backer. Pass the phone to me when the call is connected." Are you sure? This is not a joke. Immediately, a trace of panic appeared in the suited man's tone. After all, the backer he mentioned was a bluff from the start. Damn it, how could there be such a high school student? He was not even afraid of the Rulong Group. Clearly, not long ago, the young master of that organization was... Young master? Wait, if I remember correctly, the young master of the Rulong Group, Ryuto Kiryo, is currently a high school student, right? Thinking of this, the suited man's eyes widened, as if he had seen a demon. A high school student in his teens with a head full of yellow hair. Although the legendary Tong Shang Ryudu had a height of 2 meters and a physique comparable to a wrestler, if those exaggerated factors were ignored, the yellow-haired man in front of him was quite similar to the legendary young master Ryudu. He seemed to have noticed. After feeling the sudden change in the suited man's gaze, Ryuto continued to smile and said, "What? Why didn't you call me? I really want to see how strong your backer is." Cough cough, excuse me. If there's anything, why don't we talk over there? After glancing at his only remaining muscular subordinate and the other 2 high school students who walked in, the suited man made a difficult decision. He extended his hand and gestured at the president's office, not far away, inviting Ryuto in to discuss matters. Gotcha. Whoosh. However, just as the 2 of them walked in, the suited man locked the door with the fastest speed possible. He pulled down the curtains, turned his head and jumped up. He did a full 360-degree spin in the air before kneeling down. "I'm very sorry, young Master Ryuto." The suited man knocked his head on the ground with a bang. His body trembled uncontrollably, and his tears and snot flowed out. "It's over. It's over. It's over." The man in the suit had been putting on airs outside under the cover of the Dragon Group. Now, he had directly bumped into the young master's face. Wasn't this the end for him? At this point, the only thing he could do was, "This is my entire fortune and the deed to this house. Please be magnanimous and show mercy. Spare my life." Without waiting for Ryuto to say anything, the suited man obediently handed over a bag of cash and an envelope. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.